Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Nidaime water and earth affinity. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by GlidingOne and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. The night was cold, at least to the people of the village. It was a typical night in December in Konohagakure. Most of the villagers were asleep in their beds after having spent the day celebrating Konoha's alliance with Kumo. But those that weren't were keeping to themselves. The little 3-year-old blonde child wandered around the village with his head down and contemplating his purpose in life. He'd sneaked out of the orphanage, but it wasn't like they'd have noticed. They never looked at him. They never talked to him. How was he going to become Hokage if no one told him how to get there in the first place? He was lost in his loneliness. The only person to have acknowledged him was Hokage Gigi, and after seeing how everyone loved the old man, the blonde had decided that he would be just like him. Moreover, he would be better than him and his deceased successor and predecessor, Yondaime. The Yondaime, the man who saved the village, was his hero. And since everyone loved him so completely, Naruto wanted the people of the village to love him too. After all, if he was their protector, as the Sandaime had said was the job of the Hokage, then the village would have to acknowledge that he was as much a person as they were. Even if they left him alone in the orphanage for being a demon, though they never explained what they meant by that. A muffled cry interrupted his depressing thoughts, and he quickly hurried in that direction, curious. In front of him stood a tall man with a bundle under his arm. What was strange was that this bundle looked like a person, and the blonde was pretty sure that was not supposed to be normal. So, he looked up at the man who had frozen in front of him and said, "What do you think you're doing to Bayo? I'm going to be Hokage, so you better leave." The man stared at him for a moment and then shifted the bundle in his arms, like you could do anything. His sneer served to make the boy angry, and he tackled the man's legs, which coupled with the unbalance caused by the sack in his arms, forced him to drop the bundle that now appeared to be a little girl about his own age, that promptly sat up and stared with terrified pale lavender eyes. The man hadn't been expecting the child to actually attack, but the next assault was more expected, and he quickly twisted the boy's arm behind his back. The blonde cried out, and the man sneered. "You can't become Hokage, you don't have the guts or the strength. Besides, I'm going to kill you now, there's no need for any witnesses. And, from the way everyone treated the blonde pariah, I'm sure no one will miss you." The boy froze. The villagers had all told him he'd never make it to Hokage, but when the man said how no one would miss him, he believed. No one missed him while he was alive, but he still wanted to be Hokage, to make them miss him like they missed Yondaime. And no. He's wrong. Don't give up, please. The little girl cried. The blonde turned to her shocked, she had begun to cry. But before he could do anything, the man had hit her. "Just be quiet and stay down. We'll get you to Kumo soon enough, and then you can make all the noise you want." The blonde froze. This girl had been the first to acknowledge him, besides the old man who was far too busy to do more than spend a meal with him, and now this man was saying he was going to take her away. He saw red. His head was throbbing, and his limbs felt like they may have burned and then plunged into ice-cold water. Everything was hazy, and the little blonde looked around him to see the man dead and in front of him completely mutilated. He could feel a kind of horror growing up in himself. Had he done that? Had he killed the man? The blonde's breathing was speeding up and he seemed to have a hard time getting back to normal. He looked at the girl, but she still hadn't woken up. That was good. She didn't need to see this. Before long, a patrol of Anbu had come across the site and gaped at the destruction wreaked upon the man before they crouched in front of the blonde, picked up the unconscious little girl, and told him that they had to take him to the Hokage's office. The blonde nodded numbly before allowing the Anbu to pick him up and carry him away. At the Hokage tower, they found a few wide-eyed men arguing with the Hokage about how someone had taken the air and had gotten away before they could do anything. However, at seeing the Hokage, the blonde surged forward, "Hokage Gigi," before leaping into the older man's lap. "Naruto. Now's not exactly the right time to, Daddy." The little girl had awoken and struggled to get out of the Anbu's arms. Her father, too shocked at her appearance, simply wrapped his arm around her, taking her from the Anbu and allowing her to hide her face in his robes and looking confusedly at the Hokage. "Hokage-sama," the Anbu stepped forward, "we found them by the mutilated body of one of the Kumo ninja." The Hokage's shocked face spoke volumes. But, he shook the blonde, "Naruto," and the child lifted his head. "Could you tell me what happened?" I was walking in the village and I heard her and I followed him to Bayo, and I told him to put her down, and I tackled him, and I don't remember anything after that. I woke up, and he was dead." The old man stared at the little boy in his lap before he turned to the Hyuga council before him and sighed. "Hyuga-sama, I think it would be best if you went home and secured the compound." "Hi, Hokage-sama." The clan head responded, picking up his daughter and exiting the tower. "Now, Naruto, what really happened?" The old man asked softly as the child looked up, wiping tears from his eyes. She acknowledged me. And that man was going to take her away. Lifting his head, the Hokage called the Anbu forward. "Find Inu, bring him here," he ordered before turning back to the child. "Naruto, you need to train, we can't let this happen again." The child nodded and held on to the Hokage tighter. "I'm a monster, right? I don't even have real parents, right? That's why you don't tell me about them, only that they died in the Kyuubi attack." The blonde was crying at this point. "No, Naruto, your parents loved you very much." But the boy wouldn't listen, a large part of him didn't believe the old man's words. After all, he'd never seen them. Maybe the old man was lying, maybe his parents didn't exist at all. "You're just saying that." The aging Hokage grimaced, the child needed a name, a picture at least. But to tell the child any names would risk him finding out about who his parents were and make conclusions as to why he was left alone and why no one knew or liked him. No, in this case, with the kid having killed someone, there was only one conclusion. "Naruto, do you know what it means to be Hokage?" The child sniffed before responding. "It means you protect the village with everything that you have, because you love them." "Yes, Naruto. Sacrifice, like the Yondaime. Look at that picture over there, that is the Yondaime." The blonde turned to look at the wall of pictures and his eyes immediately fixated on the blonde. The Hokage pulled a picture from one of his many drawers. "And this is him with his wife. His name was Namikaze Minato and hers was Uzumaki Kushina." The blonde's eyes widened. He had many enemies, particularly in Iwagakure because of the Third Shinobi War. "You are your parents' son, but no one can know, otherwise you will be in danger, do you understand me?" The boy stared at the Redeed and the Yondaime, his role model. The one he had sworn to surpass. His father. The phrase was foreign to him, but brought a warm feeling to his gut. "How did Akasen die? I know how Otu-sen did, but..." The old man looked away from the child in his lap. His eyes held a faraway quality to them and for a moment, Naruto saw why this seemingly frail old man was called the professor and the god of shinobi. "Your mother, her clan Uzashigakure, was really good at Fuinjutsu. They were destroyed in the Third Shinobi War and any survivors were scattered to the wind. She was the only Uzumaki left in Konoha. She taught your father half of what he knew in sealing and had a special chakra that could manifest itself into chains. She was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi before your birth, which is why you have those whiskers on your cheeks, but it got out. The night of your birth and the Kyuubi attack, she held the Kyuubi down with those chains and your father defeated the beast. They both died that night." Tears had leaked out of his face at the beginning of the explanation, but now he was bawling. "Gigi. I'll make them proud. I'll be just like dad. I'll be Hokage Dadabeo." The old man smiled before looking up at Inu's entrance. "Inu, tonight there was attempt by Kumo to kidnap the Hyuga heiress. Naruto stopped them, however, I'm afraid Naruto won't be the same. I'm placing him under Anbu's care." Inu paused, as if unsure how to take care of the kid, but nodded. "Hi, Hokage-sama." He took the child's hand and tilting his head as he went back toward Anbu headquarters. They passed at least 10 Anbu before stopping at a door. "This will be your room. I'll come by tomorrow and we'll begin learning how to be a ninja." Inu seemed distant, but at least he looked at Naruto when he talked to him, unlike the ladies at the orphanage. That, Naruto decided, was what made this guy worthwhile. Kakashi stared at the boy. He had inhuman stamina. There were moments when he thought the child had had enough, but each time he suggested that they stop, Naruto jumped right back up again with renewed vigor. Already, with Kakashi adjusting his grip 2 or 3 times, the boy had begun to hit the practice target dead on. The child was a genius that learned by doing. Only a day had passed and already the child was an expert with kunai and shuriken, with the right instruction. Kakashi almost felt guilty about leaving the kid alone for the first 3 years of his life. The blonde looked up at him. "Hey Inu. Why are you wearing your dog mask now, are you on duty?" Kakashi chuckled. "Yes, it is my duty to look after you." Naruto's face fell. "But your father was my sensei." "I am Hada Kakashi." The boy's face lifted at the mention of his father and then his face filled with awe as what the Anbu revealed registered in his mind. His father's student, the Yondaime student, was teaching him. His face split into a wide smile. "Oh, okay Kakashi Nai. So I was thinking Dadabeo, do you think it might be possible for me to have special chakra like Akasan?" Kakashi stared at the blonde bundle of energy for a full minute before responding with a shrug. "Anything's possible. Kakashi Nai, I'm going to become Hokage one day Dadabeo. I'm sure you will." Naruto grinned before returning to his training. The Hokage stared at the demand in front of him made by Kumo. They wanted the death of the one that killed their emissary, or the treaty of non-violence would be null and void. Sarutobi Hiruzen chuckled before he began to pen out a reply. Thankfully, Naruto was not ninja yet and due to the fact that he was protecting another technical civilian, their actions were completely justified. The Raikage would not be willing to risk war over this so soon after the end of the last one. Hiruzen smiled as his brush met the blank scroll. "Raikage Dono, I am surprised by your demand. I am sure that your daimyo would completely agree with me, you see, you violated the treaty by attempting to kidnap the Hyuga heir. As such, you have no right to demand anything of us. The one that you want is a child and not a ninja. Our will of fire does not allow us to give him up. As a result, I regret to inform you that our agreement is null and void due to your ninja's attempt unless he was acting without orders. Sincerely, Sandame Hokage Shiratobi Hiruzen. Hiruzen rolled up a scroll and handed it to his secretary before turning back to his paperwork. It was up to the Raikage now to do what he would. Kakashi was prowling through the clothing store like a child afraid of getting caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He was picking out the standard slacks and black sandals, a mesh shirt with a long-sleeved overshirt that most jounin would use under a flak jacket and a white jacket with orange stripes along the hem and going down the arm. Naruto would look just like his father, especially once the kid became a chunin, which Kakashi was pretty sure wouldn't take all that long. The kid had already unlocked his chakra and memorized the hand seals, all the while proclaiming loudly that he was going to become Hokage and that if Kakashi just let him study seals, then he'd be able to make his parents proud. Kakashi had mixed feelings when he first started training the kid, but in the short 2 weeks that the kid had been with him and attached himself to Kakashi's hip, he'd also attached himself to Kakashi's heart. He was like the little brother Kakashi never had, but would have had the Kyuubi never gotten out. One thing he'd noticed in the 2 weeks he'd been taking care of the blonde, however, was that when he went out with Naruto people would glare at the child, reminded of the Kyuubi. Kakashi, feeling particularly spiteful, wanted to freak everyone out with how much the Kyuubi brat looked like Yondaime. He snickered under his breath as he grabbed another 2 pairs of blue and black slacks, making sure that orange was somewhere, if only a line of fabric. Naruto stared at the package that Kakashi gave him in wonder. No one besides the old man had ever actually given him a present. He looked up at Kakashi Nai for approval and received an eye smile in response before he tore the package open and stared at the shinobi outfit in happiness. He ran to the bathroom in his Anbu quarters and quickly changed into the outfit before jumping out as the spitting image of his father. Kakashi smiled psychotically, imagining the creeped-out faces of the village. "Kakashi Nai, can you teach me the academy stuffs?" Naruto asked with all the hope that the 3-year-old could muster. Sure. This kid was going to rock the elemental nations. As they walked down the corridors of the Anbu headquarters, they were subject to many stares, but Naruto seemed to be ignoring it. He was jumping, skipping, going back to Kakashi, and running ahead again. Hiruzen looked at the council that had been called and scowled. Kaharu, one of his old teammates, triumphantly smirked as she spoke up to address the council, Hiruzen burning holes into her back. Gumo demands the life of our Jinchuriki due to the death of their emissary on the night the treaty was signed. With that she nodded ever so slightly to another council member, Shimura Danzo, and as she was moving to sit a chorus of voices rose up, mostly from the civilian side. Just as Hiruzen was about to respond he paused. Hyuga Hiashi stood up and everyone quieted. Kumo attempted to kidnap my heir. Had Naruto not been there, they would have succeeded. Due to his services to the Hyuga clan we extend to him our protection and proclaim him a friend of the Hyuga. He sat down and glared at the council, daring any to go against the child. Hiruzen smiled, bowing his hat slightly to hide his face before lifting it again and addressing the council. Gumo has already received my answer. They can forget it, as can you all. But, Hizen. Kaharu began but the old man silenced her. That is my decision. But he cannot be allowed to roam free. He killed a man. A civilian cried, and Danzo smiled cruelly. It seemed he'd finally get the Jinchuriki to mold into the perfect weapon. He is being trained by one of my most trusted Anbu. And his plans for the boy came crashing down. Who? Hiashi inquired curiously. Pada Kakashi, the last surviving student of Yondaime. Uchiha asked with a scowl and still upset that a non-Uchiha had the Sharingan. Hi, he seems to have taken to the boy. The aged Hokage replied with a smile. But he killed a man. What if he turns on our children? The boy cannot enter the academy, he is dangerous. That same civilian shouted in panic. Some other shinobi voiced their agreement while the shinobi clan heads shook their heads in disbelief. Hiruzen himself simply sighed and nodded in assent. He won't need the academy, Kakashi will teach him all he needs to know, and as soon as the child is ready, he will take the graduation test and become a shinobi. After that he will be under my command and you will not have to concern yourselves with him. Now, all we can do is wait for Kumo's response. There will be war or there won't. If that is all, I think this meeting is over. The council was grumbling as they left, however Hiashi stayed behind and approached the man. Please give this to the boy and tell him, should he need anything of the Hyuga, all he needs to do is present this to one, and they will help him. We will forever be in his debt. The clan head gave the Hokage a pendant and left, leaving the few remaining in shock. Hiruzen, however, smiled and stood to take the boy his gift and write a letter to one of his old students. Kakashi took one look at Guy, his eternal rival, and sighed. He's my apprentice, he explained and smirked when Guy began to cry exasperatingly. Kakashi, you beat me at getting a disciple to whom I can teach my flames of youth. Naruto peeked out from behind Kakashi. Kakashi Nai. Kakashi. He sees you as his brother. No. I will not be defeated. I will find an apprentice of my own. And if I do not, I will climb the Hokage mountain using only my toes. Guy went running off into the village, aiming for the academy and proclaiming the wonder of youth, hoping beyond hope that he'd find a disciple worthy of his teachings. Kakashi looked down to the frightened form of his sensei's son. Was that a mutant frog? Because I like frogs, or rather toads, but that was just creepy. Naruto whispered, clinging to his Nai-san and refusing to let go. No, that was one of the Jounin, but don't worry, he's one of the craziest. He's completely unique and, hopefully, when he gets an apprentice the child will not follow in his sensei's footsteps completely. Oh. So, he's strong but freaky Dadabeo? Kakashi stared at Naruto for a moment before throwing his head back in laughter. Yes. Exactly. Kakashi affirmed between laughs and giggles. Jiraiya stared at his spy in shock, his sake bottle hitting the table with a thunk. Kumo had demanded the life of a child of Konoha because one of their emissaries died while trying to kidnap the Hyuga heir. Surely Sarutobi-sensei wouldn't. Jiraiya flew to his room, quickly packing, and rushed as quickly as possible back to Konoha. Irakage reread the Hokage's letter and scowled. He didn't really want a war, but he had expected the peace-loving Hokage to jump at the chance to avoid it before he would be called on his bluff. But no, the Hokage had called him on it and now he wouldn't be able to follow through with his threat. Kumo simply did not have the resources at the moment for another war. Maybe in 3 or 4 years they would, but certainly not at the moment. Irakage slammed his hand onto his desk, effectively breaking it before barking to his secretary to call a council. The negotiations with Konoha had failed, perhaps he'd have better luck with Iwa. Jiraiya had traveled for 2 days before he made it to the gates of Konoha. Once he had, he immediately searched for signs of preparation for a war. Seeing no obvious ones, he assumed the worst. Had his sensei really handed the child over to Kumo? Thoughts of the like haunted Dagama Sennin's mind as the sage headed through the window of the Hokage tower. What's this I hear about Kumo demanding the life of a child? He growled at his old sensei that looked up at his entrance. Ah, Jiraiya. I've meant to contact you. Answer me, old man. Sarutobi sighed and looked down. Naruto-kun saved the Hyuga heiress, and the seal cracked. The Kumo nin died, and the Raikage demanded the culprit's head. Jiraiya's eyes had gotten large, and he looked about to murder his sensei who suddenly looked up and smiled. I told them to stuff it, that it was a child, and that they broke the treaty first. They had no legal right to demand anything. Jiraiya stared at his sensei with a newfound pride. The man still had a backbone when it really counted. Then he thought about it some more and froze. What has Kumo said? They can't really say anything. I did tell them that I would not tolerate that. And they did break the treaty. If they try to ignore that, we have Suna. Kiri is in the midst of its own civil wars, and both Kumo and Iwa are still recovering from the last war. We'll be fine. Jiraiya looked skeptical, but sighed and nodded. I sure hope so, sensei. Kakashi had decided that he would teach Naruto tree climbing and water walking because the kid had way too much chakra to make a simple bunshin and terrible control. And so, the next morning that was what he planned to tell the little blonde. Alright, Naruto. Today we are going to learn how to climb trees. Kakashi nearly laughed at the incredulous look on Naruto's face. What about the bunshin? This is a step toward that. Kakashi smiled at his charge, concentrate chakra to your feet and climb. To add effect to his words, Kakashi began to slowly climb the tree vertically. Naruto's awe-filled eyes actually made Kakashi feel good about himself if only slightly. Okay, you try, but start at a run. Watch. I'll get this down by nightfall. The boy declared with such conviction and confidence that for a moment Kakashi actually believed the kid. Just don't exhaust yourself. I'll be over here if you need anything. Hi. And so Naruto tried and tried and tried. Kakashi Nai. Yes, Naruto. You're really good at this, Databeo. Can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? Kakashi smiled. The child was right, he did learn the tree climbing by the end of the day. And he was bragging to any that would listen to him in the Anbu dining area. Considering he was not even 4 yet and could already tree walk, the Anbu had proclaimed him a prodigy and told Kakashi that he should look into teaching a bit more. One, however, had his doubts and readily voiced them. He was called Tenzu. Don't you think you're pushing him a bit too much? He might not have had enough chakra. Why teach him something so difficult? He doesn't have the control for the bunshin or the regular henge because he has too much for chakra his age. He's made the henge solid, but it uses much more chakra. With better control, as soon as he learns the bunshin, technically, he could pass the academy. What with all the history lessons I sneak in before he sleeps and our hour-long sessions of shogi, logic puzzles, and math. He can actually do all that. A solid henge. That must take a lot of chakra. It would make him perfect for infiltration. Maybe in another year he'll graduate. He still needs to work on the academics. He's getting the hang of it though, and it shouldn't take too long. And how long have you been training him? About a month. Come on, Naruto, it's time for you to go to bed. Kakashi called out to the blonde that simply looked up and smiled brightly. Okay, Kakashi Nai. Can you tell me more about Yondaime and that cool flashy jutsu? No, today I'm going to tell you about Obito Nai and Rin-ni. Kakashi replied with a sad smile seen by none, yet all, the Anbu. Who were they? Some very good friends of mine and students of Yondaime along with me. Really? Cool, they must have been great ninja. Can I meet them? Naruto asked enthusiastically, and yet Kakashi Nai, for some strange reason, got a really sad look in his eye that Naruto could identify immediately. He'd seen it in the mirror many times before. It was loneliness. They're no longer with us. They are heroes of Konoha. Naruto's head lowered and he suddenly wasn't so excited. But then he remembered, his Otu-san knew them and taught them, so they had to have been great people. Naruto's head lifted and he looked up at Kakashi Nai, so what were they like? And they left the cafeteria and 3 dozen shocked Anbu and returned to the blonde's room where Naruto learned all about Uchiha Obito and Rin, their team medic. This in turn led to a long-winded history lesson, told in simple terms for the 3.5-year-old, about the founding of Konoha, the Senju and Uchiha, and how the Shodai Hokage fought Uchiha Madara. Naruto really wanted to meet the Uchiha and make friends of them, they seemed so cool. Morning came all too soon for Naruto, but he smiled widely when Kakashi Nai told him that today he'd try the Bunshin and that if he didn't get it, he'd learn to walk on water. The child, that was not yet 4 years old, grinned in anticipation. Regardless, Naruto really wanted to impress Kakashi Nai and so he focused really hard on making a Bunshin. And he made 2 dead ones. Sighing in defeat, Naruto scratched the back of his head, a habit he had unknowingly picked up from the Anbu from said Anbu's babysitting duties a year ago. Well, it looks like we have a bit more work to do. Come along, this is the second stage of what you learned yesterday, you have to keep a steady stream of chakra to stay up. But I don't know how to swim, Naruto replied shyly. Don't worry, I'll fish you out and we'll learn swimming another day. Kakashi's smile raised Naruto's spirits immediately. His first attempt was as successful as a wet cat. His second was perfect. Kakashi couldn't even hide the fact that he was smiling. Alright, try the Bunshin again. If you can't do it, I'll go talk to the Hokage. When Naruto failed again he nearly cried, but Kakashi Nai simply placed his hand on Naruto's head and smiled. Practice some taijutsu for a while, I'll go talk to the Hokage. Don't feel bad. Most children your age can't even throw a kunai straight. Kakashi's smile was enough for the 3-year-old. As he began to practice his kata, Kakashi Nai left. But due to the fact that Naruto was still high off of the praise, he continued his exercises. He was too delirious with happiness to even wonder if this was all a dream or if Kakashi Nai wouldn't come back, because Naruto knew Kakashi Nai would come back. He had to. Kakashi entered the Hokage's office in full Anbu attire. There he found the Toad-san and Jiraiya and the old man himself. Hokage-sama. Ah, Inu. How is Naruto's training going? He's almost ready to graduate the academy. The Hokage's pipe nearly fell out of his mouth and the Toad Sage openly gaped. I teach him history in the form of bedtime stories and we spend 2 hours a day on academics. He has been found to be a natural at kunai and shuriken once his grip was corrected and is near perfect now. His taijutsu forms are getting steadily better and when they are put into practice he proves to be very unpredictable. Ninjutsu he's learned 2 of the academy 3. The Hokage's shock was palpable. He's only 3. Jiraiya whispered. However, the 2 old men looked up at the teenage Anbu, he doesn't have enough control for the Bunshin. I've taught him tree climbing and water walking, but it's still not enough. Do you think the fox could be interfering with his control? It's possible. Perhaps another type of Bunshin would be better for the child. Find out his elemental affinity. If it's water or earth, teach him one of the ones you know. If not, perhaps we can teach him Kaja Bunshin, as long as he understands its dangers. His healing ability and the Kyuubi should negate it, but just to be cautious, he should be aware of what it entails. Hi, Hokage-sama. And Inu. Yes, Hokage-sama. This is a thank you gift from the Hyuga. Perhaps Naruto would like to play with some Hyuga children. He shouldn't have to grow up so fast just because he did an honorable service. I'm sure he'd enjoy that. Kakashi left as swiftly as he had arrived and Jiraiya turned to his old sensei. That kid is a genius, maybe an even bigger one than Minato and Kakashi combined. Sarutobi smiled, and he has the will of fire already. He claims that he will be Hokage and protect what his parents sacrificed their lives to protect. He may very well be my next choice if I live long enough to see him grow. Jiraiya's small smile was enough to lift the Hokage's spirits. He hadn't seen his student smile since the night Yondaime died. That boy was destined for great things. Alright, Naruto, channel some chakra into this. Kakashi Nai held out a paper to the blonde. Naruto looked curiously at the paper and then up at Kakashi with a curious expression on his face. Why? It's for training. We're going to see what kinds of jutsu are more natural for you to do. Naruto's eyes lit up in anticipation, and he furiously concentrated on the slip of paper in his little hands which promptly split in half, startling the child. Just like his father, Kakashi mused out loud. Naruto looked up hopefully at his surrogate brother. What does that mean? What does that mean? Your elemental affinity is wind, and I can't teach you any of the elemental bunshin, as there is none for wind. Naruto's face fell. It also means the Hokage has given me permission to teach you the Kage bunshin. And Naruto's interest was piqued. Now this is a kenjutsu. Do you know what a kenjutsu is? No. Well then, when Naruto heard that he was a friend of the Hyuga he thought it was a joke. At least, that was what he thought before Kakashi Nai gave him a necklace with a flame emblem on it. After that, he wanted to go meet that girl that he'd saved. That was what led to the two walking around the village in the direction of the Hyuga compound. All-round glares were directed at the blonde. He didn't yet understand why they glared, but he was very glad that he had Kakashi Nai as he clung to his surrogate brother's Jounin uniform. The kid didn't want to wear his outfit until he became a genin, which Kakashi Nai said he was qualified to become, but wasn't because he still needed to learn a few academic things that would help him overall as a ninja. However, he couldn't wait until he could look just like his father and Nai-san. Naruto skipped into the compound once they finally arrived and startled a few Hyuga that were not used to hyperactive children. The glares had ceased outside the Hyuga gates, but there was something else in their eyes. It was a feature unfamiliar to the child. They were grateful. Not used to the approval by so many people at one time, Naruto clung closer to Kakashi's pants than he had before. Naruto breathed out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding once Kakashi Nai stopped them at the door to the clan head's office. "Hello Hyuga-sama, this is Naruto. He'd like to see Hinata-sama and see if she'd like to be his friend." Kakashi introduced with that perpetual smile on his face and placing his hand on the blonde's massive hair that, due to its untrimmed state, was beginning to look like his father's. It was yet another ploy by Kakashi to freak out the villagers. "Hi, we have met before. You have the clan's gratitude Uzumaki Naruto," said blonde blushed, not used to the praise but happy with the acknowledgement. "I'm going to be Hokage one day. Kakashi Nai even said I might become a genin soon." Naruto proclaimed loudly, slightly startling the Hyuga clan head who simply nodded. "Hinata is with her mother at the park," the clan head told the one-eyed Anbu captain. Naruto began bouncing with excitement. Ooh. "Kakashi Nai, can we go see Hinata-chan? Maybe she'll let me play with her." His head bobbed up and down as he desperately tried to reassure himself that when she acknowledged him that night a month earlier had not just been a fluke and that her mom was not going to pull her away like so many others. But he was awesome, so he shouldn't worry, right? Kakashi smiled and looked up at the Hyuga head that simply nodded and returned to his paperwork, the bane of all those in the position of authority. Nah, Kakashi Nai. Who's that?" Naruto pointed at a tall woman with midnight black-blue waist-length hair. "Her?" Kakashi received an affirmative nod. "She is Hyuga-sama." Naruto rolled his eyes at his surrogate big brother. "I know that. Her eyes say so. I mean, who is she? She's so pretty, almost as pretty as Aka-sen was." He received a bop on the head. "That is Hyuga-sama, as in the wife of the clan head and mother of your little friend." "Oh." Naruto rubbed his head where his brother had smacked him and looked up playfully angry at his brother. "You should have said so." "Ah, well. Come on, let's go introduce ourselves." No sooner had the words left the teenager's mouth than the blonde grabbed a hold of his brother's hands and began dragging said brother toward the pretty lady. "Hi. I'm Naruto, and I'm going to be Hokage one day Dadabeo," the blonde proclaimed to the Hyuga matron. She'd been having a relatively peaceful day. After the near kidnapping of her daughter, many in the clan had been slightly nervous, and once they heard of Kumo's attempt to demand compensation in the form of the life of the one that had killed their ninja, they'd been more so. She shuddered to think what would have happened had one of the Hyuga been the one to stop the Kumo nin. Would the Hokage have been as firm in denying Kumo, or would one of her clansmen been sacrificed for the good of the village? She had found herself very grateful to the blonde Jinchuriki that had saved her daughter and found herself thinking back on her days in the academy where another Uzumaki had proclaimed that she would be the first female Hokage. From what her husband had told her, the two acted very much alike and he was already showing small signs of the verbal tic for which that female Uzumaki was so famous. She was startled out of her thoughts when a blonde, the same blonde that had occupied her thoughts moments earlier, came up to her and proclaimed, "Hi. I'm Naruto and I'm going to be Hokage one day Dadabeo." If she hadn't known any better she would have thought that her old schoolmate had switched bodies with said schoolmate's crush, of which everyone knew but did not have the courage to confront her about. However, the blonde was looking at her with expectant and surprisingly guarded eyes. "Oh really? Well, you had better listen to what your teachers tell you then," she replied to the waiting blonde with a smile on her face. "I do," he replied with a pout which he quickly replaced with a smile at the nice lady that hadn't yelled at him yet. "Kakashi Nai said that you're Hinata-chan's mom. Do you know where she is?" he asked, slightly shy but not at all put off by the regal woman. Her entire face lit up as she thought of Hinata's first real friend. She needed a friend. Why, yes, I do. She's somewhere in the playground. Why don't you go look for her? The blonde, too excited from actually get permission from a mother for once, went bounding away quickly in search of the lavender-eyed girl that he'd met a month earlier. Thank you. Kakashi told the Hyuga once the boy was gone, and she turned to him with a small smile on her face. Hinata needs this friendship just as much as he does, I believe. She is too shy for her own good. And Kakashi turned to the Hyuga lady. Is something wrong? She had activated her taijutsu. There are those bullies again. They pick on her because she stutters and because she is of the main house. Should I go stop? She had a smile on her face and had turned off her taijutsu. Them? No, it's alright. It seems Naruto has just found her and scared them off with a well-placed punch. She turned her smile to the one-eyed teen. Thank you for bringing Naruto here today. I'm sure this is simply the start of a wonderful friendship between the two. But Tsuchikage leaned back in his seat with a perpetual smile on his face. So Kumo had failed in their attempt to capture the Byakugan. They risked war in calling for the murderer of their dead ninja. With the two forces of Iwa and Kumo, they'd be ready for war in 3 years, and then Iwa would get its revenge on Konoha for what the Kairoi Senku did. He leaned over his desk to write a reply to the Reikage. They'd strike at the Chunin exams that were set to be held in Suna in 3 years' time, and then Konoha would have no allies on which it could fall back. It was perfect, absolutely foolproof. There would be no recovery for the arrogant Konohinin. On Naruto's 4th birthday, he ditched Kakashi on his lessons and spent the day at the Ichiraku ramen stand. Tucci, the owner of the stand, was really nice, and ramen was heavenly. There was no equal. Ichiraku even boasted about how the Yondaime Hokage came and ate there with some redeed that Naruto knew was his mother, and she was his best customer, being able to eat bowls upon bowls of ramen. And so, Naruto decided that since ramen was so amazing, and since his mother was such a big fan, he would be too. The 4-and-a-half-year-old Naruto looked around the corner of the Anbu headquarters main hallway. If all had gone according to plan, they'd all be running out in 5 4 3 2 bingo. In every hallway was a Naruto clone that, as soon as it came into contact with the now multicolored Anbu after him, would hinge into a guy that looked as if he had been thoroughly doused by a water dragon. And in spandex that does not look good at all. The blonde snickered as he sneaked into the kitchen that had been vacated by the Anbu and poured powder into the ramen soup. It was laughing powder designed to make even an Aburam laugh. He quickly crept out and hurried to his room before dispelling all his clones. The prank had gone without a hitch. The Hokage mountain had been painted using reappearing ink last night that would disappear as soon as he applied it and reappear when a clone applied chakra, and the paint bombs had been set off by low-key explosive tags. His diversion had gone perfectly and he wasn't even caught yet. Mind you, he respected the Hokage greatly, especially his father, which was why he left that one mostly alone and only added a nosebleed because face it. His mom was gorgeous, and his father would have to have been gay to not have had any naughty thoughts of his mother, which he knew was not so considering he was alive. But he couldn't show absolute favoritism on one Hokage and not the others, and he needed a huge diversion to keep all the Anbu busy. They all had the same treatment. Especially since Kakashi Nai had been late for their weekly Shogi matches. Naruto didn't like Shogi, but to be late when you set something up is just rude. He froze when he heard the knock on his door. They caught him already. Shoot. He'd have to work on his escape tactics a little more. He slowly opened the door and plastered on an innocent smile on his face. It completely fell apart when he looked at the many colors of all the Anbu. Their masks and hair were not spared. Weren't these supposed to be the elite? Although he did catch them in the headquarters, he'd never get away with something like this ever again. Ah well, he'd just have to go bigger next time. What's bigger than the Hokage monument? He'd have to consult Hinata-chan on this. So, it turned out that the academy and the police headquarters were great targets to prank. All of the kids were older than Naruto, and he was due to go and take his test there within 9 months, which meant that it would be nice and clean by the time he went and he'd be off of his grounding. He'd planned it for 3 hours while he couldn't sleep and had 10 clones running around the academy while everyone was asleep. The Uchiha police had gone home for the day and there were only 2 Chunin on guard. He snickered as he put his plan into motion. The next morning found all the academy walls in tie-dye, all the kunai bright orange, and the tests all written on. Ah, life was great. This time, Naruto was hiding with Hinata-chan at the ramen shop. Wait, what? I'm going to be a big sister in late March or early April. Hinata repeated, again a large smile on her face. Cool. I'm going to be taking the graduation test on April 15th. He said brightly, we can teach her to be a great ninja like us too. That's a great idea, Naruto, though I don't know if it'll be a boy or a girl. It'll be a girl. Naruto said convincingly. And she'll be just as nice as you and your mom. What is it? Naruto had been staring at the wrinkled bundle in Hyuga-sama's arms for about 5 minutes and he still couldn't understand where Hinata's little sister was. Much to the blonde 5-year-old's irritation, everyone chuckled. He wasn't a ninja yet. They shouldn't laugh at him for not knowing something. He looked back to the wrinkled little bundle. Well, what is it? He was getting quite impatient. That's my new little sister. Why is she so small? That's how babies are, silly. He leaned closer to look at the child. Are you sure she'll get bigger? His skeptical face made Kakashi unable to keep his snort of laughter contained. Yes, Naruto. Hey Hinata-chan, were you ever like that? No, I think so. Baraka-sen's laugh was like a chime. So were you, Naruto-kun. PSH, me? Never. I'm going to be Hokage one day. That's not what a Hokage looks like. He pouted and crossed his arms across his chest. Even mighty Hokages were once this small. His wide eyes displayed his incredulity. Watch, she'll grow to be a nice strong shinobi one day. He leaned over the bundle again and sighed. Well then, she'll need an Ai-san too, right, and one that's not always so I'm a Hyuga, I will suck your blood or happiness or whatever. Hinata smiled and her cousin Niji glared. Life was good. Naruto sat on the swing. Hinata was later than usual and he was waiting all alone at the park. His ninja test was almost coming up. This would be the last time he and Hinata would get to play. And that damn theme song wouldn't get out of his head. The night before, Kakashi Nai had turned on the television and the theme song of the anime show was really catchy. So as he swung he hummed and sang the only words he remembered. I really want you to realize the fact that you're beautiful him. If you'd notice your beauty, I would be happy. I'm thinking of you, please realize your beauty. And that was how Hinata found him sitting on the swing and repeating the ending of that song. Hinata-chan. The word was more wine than anything else and Hinata's eyes widened. Was he talking about her? She felt her face heat up and things started to get black. She couldn't see anything. But she could hear odd. She was blind and getting dizzy. Naruto-kun. Her panicked cry brought him running. Hinata-chan, are you okay? Naruto-kun, I can't see. Sit down Hinata-chan. I'll help you. She sat and her vision began to return. Naruto-kun, thank you, I can see again. No, what were you singing? Oh, Kakashi Nai turned on the TV last night and the song's been stuck in my head since then. Hey, why were you late, Hinata-chan? My Otu-san wanted to work on some more juken a bit. Her head lowered. For a moment she had thought that was the day that Hinata discovered that she cared about Naruto's opinion of her and how he felt about her. Chapter 2. Naruto was practically jumping in his seat waiting for the rest of the students taking the exam to finish the written test. He was nervous, oh goodness he really hoped he passed, but he knew that if he didn't Kakashi Nai wouldn't be mad. Of course, there was no reason why he shouldn't pass. He'd been ready to graduate for 2 years now. It was just Kakashi Nai had said that he would let Naruto sign his dog contract if he became a genin. Now, he wanted to sign the toad contract like his father, but he loved the dogs, they would stay with him whenever Kakashi Nai had to go on some top secret Anbu mission. The only way Kakashi Nai had gotten him to agree was through bribery that Kakashi Nai had worked out with the Gama-senin and his toads. Naruto would sign the dog contract upon his graduation from the academy and the toad contract when he became a chunin. So, yes, he was nervous. He was desperate to start his official path to Hokage. These past few years had been great, but he was ready to get serious and become a real ninja like his parents and big brother. He sighed and stared at the clock. Would the test never end? Scratch that. Was this test a joke? Naruto had passed the projectiles test with flying colors and his taijutsu confused the instructors, but really? Just make 3 clones and automatically it's a pass. He rolled his eyes, made his favorite seal for his favorite kinjutsu, besides the one he'd created last year to get away from the Anbu that one time channeled his chakra and made 3 perfect cage bunshin. He loved the looks on their faces. It took them a moment to recover but they did. Angra, the one with a scar across his nose, began but was cut off by his long-haired partner. Naruto wasn't sure if it was a guy or not. You didn't do the bunshin. Naruto scratched the back of his head with a smile on his face. Yeah, well Kakashi Nai said that no matter how many chakra control exercises I try my chakra just acts funny on that jutsu. So, he talked to Hokajoji and they told me I could learn Kage Bunshin. It's great for inflat. No, that's not right. Infiltrate inflation. No infiltration. Yeah, that's right. He nodded his head to himself determinedly and proud that he'd remembered the big word. The other Chunin examiner nodded and replied, well, if it's a medical condition and considering you're capable of creating a bunshin, you pass. Congratulations. Naruto took his hit I-8 reverently and stared at it for a moment. He was now, according to the law, an adult. His 5-year-old mind nearly exploded in excitement. Thanks. Bye. I've got to show Kakashi Nai. Hey, wait a minute, we still have the serum. The kid had already disappeared, one he. He'll figure it out. The other examiner replied dismissively while opening the door for the next genin hopeful. Naruto sped past the villagers with high genin level speed that he and Kakashi Nai were still working on improving, searching for said brother. His hit I-8 was clutched in his hands tightly and he wanted to show his brother. Kakashi Nai. Kakashi Nai. He shouted as soon as he got to the Anbu headquarters. Why hello Uzumaki-kun. Naruto looked toward the voice, did you pass? And found a jounin with his hit I-8 used as a bandana, tied in the front and a senbon in his mouth. Naruto's face broke out in a fierce smile, I did Databeo. With flying colors, whatever that means. Kakashi Nai is always saying weird stuff like that. Ooh, his face scrunched up in his excitement, I can't wait to show Kakashi Nai, do you know where he is? I have to find him. Whoa, hold on. You need to slow down a bit. His head cocked to the side and he scratched his head, but Kakashi Nai and I are working on our speed. The jounin chuckled and shook his head, that's great in training and fighting, but sometimes it's best to just relax a bit. Now, I don't know where Kakashi is, but I'm sure he'll be here soon. The jounin smiled and Naruto, finally remembering his manners, scratched his head yet again and smiled up at the jounin. Hey, you kind of have me, you see you know my name, but I don't know yours Databeo. One eyebrow lifted, my name is Shiranui Genma. Genma-san, where have I heard that name before? The blonde's face scrunched up in concentration, oh I remember. You were Yondame's bodyguard or something. Though I don't see why a Hokage really needs a bodyguard ya. Kakashi Nai told me all about Yondame Databeo. Well, Genma paused, the kid looked familiar, and not just from the glimpses he'd gotten around the village or from the gossip of off-duty Anbu. Minato-sama surely didn't he needed to talk to the Hokage, don't push yourself too hard. I'll tell Kakashi to go to the graduation ceremony if I see him. Genma waved and prepared to have a talk with the Hokage, but the comical widening of the blonde's eyes made him stop. There's a graduation ceremony. Genma nodded, yeah, it should be starting in 5 minutes. Why didn't anyone tell me? Naruto's rapid exit left the dust turned up and Genma found himself coughing almost as badly as Hate usually did. Naruto made it back to the academy just as the ceremony began. He couldn't help but feel slightly out of place, though because all the new genin ranged from ages 10 to 12. Nevertheless, he went around looking for Kakashi Nai and trying to ignore the glares of the civilian parents. Where is that lazy, late jounin? He whispered to himself under his breath. The hand came down on his head, where's that hit I-8? A cold voice rang out from behind him. Naruto grinned and turned around holding up the blue cloth to his big brother, Kakashi Nai. I did it. The sinister look on Kakashi's face disappeared as if it had never been there at all, and Kakashi's smile of pride, somehow visible through his mask, almost meant more to Naruto than all the respect in the village. Kakashi's opinion was important to Naruto, but Naruto had always asked why he couldn't make his cake and eat it too. Boy, Kakashi Nai, can we have ramen today? We haven't had it all week. Sure. Shiranui Genma had always been calm and collected, and this was no exception. So when he entered the Hokage's office, through the door thank you very much, he had a schooled expression of pure indifference on his face. Ah, Genma-san, Sandame exclaimed at his entrance, what can I do for you today? Now, Genma was not one to beat around the bush before, nor was he willing to do that now. Minato's choice was not by chance, was it? The Hokage's eyebrows lifted in surprise. This is a bit abrupt, is it not? Genma shrugged. I met the kid today. He looks a lot like his father, especially with his hair done like that, although I guess you already knew that. The old man nodded, yes, he has many of his father's attributes, as well as his mother's. However he is very much his own person, which I believe helped Kakashi come to terms with their deaths. What was your point in coming all this way? I know it can't have been just to confirm the child's lineage. Genma nodded, Raito, Katsuo, and I are the only ones in the village capable of using Hiraishin. It's, technically, a family jutsu. I request to be his jounin sensei. The Hokage remained silent for a moment, Kakashi won't be overly happy, but I guess I can promise Naruto to him once Naruto's a chunin. The two men shared a smirk, I'm not going to steal him from Kakashi, they're free to spend as much time together as possible, I just want to teach him Hiraishin, and the only legal way I can do that is to be his jounin sensei. Yes, the village needs to remember the will of fire. What better way for that than to have the one that they blame to protect them and care, even though they might not. Yes, I'll set up a team under you Genma-san. Thank you. Naruto and Kakashi Nai had been at Ichiraku and Naruto, after 5 bowls, still showed no signs of stopping. However, knowing his wallet was not endless Kakashi brought up his hand, now, I think you've had enough for the night, you're going to have your team assignments next week and you still need to sign the dog contract. Come on, I'm sure they'll be ecstatic to hear you passed. What does ecstatic mean? It means excited. Oi Kakashi Nai, do you think my teammates will like me? If they don't, you can always bug them until they do. He sighed, I'm sorry I was slightly late to your graduation, Naruto. It's just guy was going on about how he'd finally found an apprentice worthy enough to study under him and he wouldn't let me leave. I think he's still sore over the fact that you graduated. I the freak with caterpillars for eyebrows. Kakashi snorted, yeah, but don't tell that to either of their faces. They may look like freaks, but their personalities are more so. Come on, next week we begin Operation Doppelganger. That's the one where I dress up like dad and freak out the villagers, right? Yep. The two shared deranged smiles before they continued on to the Anbu headquarters. The week seemed to be teasing Naruto with how slow it was going. No matter what Naruto tried, he couldn't seem to make time go by any faster. He couldn't pull any more pranks on the Anbu or Jounin because he was a ninja now and had to grow up, whatever that meant, and Hinata-chan was training with her dad and spending time with her little sister Hanabi-chan. Hinata-chan, he didn't know how much time he'd have left over to spend with her, but she was his best friend and he was determined to make some time, no matter what it took. I mean really. Who knew how Hanabi-chan would turn out without his attitude sometimes? She lived with people that were colder than marble. Marble. That's a stone and they didn't get really hot, at least they didn't when you placed a hot pan on them. So that was how he found himself in the library looking for Futon Jutsu and anything about Fuin Jutsu, his Uzumaki heritage. He found quite a few scrolls on Fuin Jutsu, which he sent a clone to check out and begin studying, and only one Futon Jutsu, with a reference to some guy named Sarutobi Asuma, who was, apparently, not in the village at the moment. So much for that Naruto was bored. Maybe the dogs were too much work. He was bored, but the dogs weren't the best of company when in the village. He'd let his clone study Fuin Jutsu while he went to the park. Maybe Hinata-chan would be let out earlier than usual. The week took a while to pass, but it eventually did, and so when he went back to the academy, faces turned and stared at the Yondame's mini-clone, rubbed their eyes to make sure they were awake, used any and all Genjutsu releasing techniques they knew, and some even fainted. For there was Naruto in his Yondame get-up sans the Chunin Jounin flak jacket, but complete with the cape. And Kakashi Nai was at his side. He couldn't help it, he was excited. He was going to get a team, and hopefully they'd be like Hinata-chan and be his friends. He certainly hoped so. Once at the academy he found that he couldn't sit still in the hardwood and was practically bouncing and trying to avoid the disbelieving stares of his fellow genin. They all seemed to have a hard time believing that a genin could be 5 for some strange reason. The door opened and out stepped that Chunin with the scar on his face. Hello. This is the day that you go out and serve the village. These teams that you have today will be like a second family. Teams will come and go, but the most memorable teams are usually your first. Now the teams are as follows: Naruto zoned out. And Team 9 will be Uzumaki Naruto, he perked up, Inuzuka Hana and Haruno Ichiru. Please go have lunch, your Jonin senseis will be here when you're done. Naruto looked around to the two kids that had been called and smiled brightly at the girl with red triangles on her cheeks and the boy with Uzumaki red hair before he walked over and scratched the back of his head. You want to go get something to eat at Ichiraku Ramen? He asked and they both grimaced. You're what, 5? That's my little sister's age. Haruno sneered and Naruto paused in his happiness at getting a team. His eyes turned steely and he faced them. I've been ready to graduate for 2 years now, so don't underestimate me. Then his whole face transformed. I'm going to be Hokage Databeo. The two preteens stared at one another and then at the 5-year-old in front of them. Alright then, what can you do? The Inuzuka asked cautiously and Naruto glad that the ice was almost broken. Well, I can do a solid henge, which Kakashi Nai says no one else can really do because it uses so much chakra, and I can do Kawarimi pretty good too. And I can't really do Bunshin because it only needs a little bit of chakra. Wait, you can't even do a simple Bunshin. How did you even graduate? Naruto smiled slightly, medical condition. And I did the Kage Bunshin, a Kenjutsu that Kakashi Nai had to ask the Hokage permission for. Anyway, I can throw kunai pretty straight and Kakashi Nai has me trying to figure out Shaogi, but that's just really weird and I'm not too good at it. Why are you staring? For, indeed, they were. The blonde was an enigma to them. He was so unlike how they thought he would be. He wasn't too cocky, like one would expect of child prodigies. Rather, he was desperate for friends and seemed to try almost too hard to make friends of them. He reminded Hana of her own little brother, if not a little less, if only because he wasn't her brother, and so she said, why don't we all go get some ramen like you said, then maybe we can get to know one another a bit more. The smile she got from the little child was more than enough to confirm her thoughts of the blonde. Yeah, that's a great idea. Kakashi Nai is always saying that teamwork is important. That's something Obito Nai taught him. Geez, how many big brothers do you have? Ichiru commented a little annoyed and immediately regretted it when the blonde's face fell. Well, Kakashi Nai and Obito Nai aren't really my brothers, I'm an only child and my parents are dead. So is Obito Nai. But Kakashi Nai knew them all and he's been telling me all sorts of stories about them from the last war. They're pretty much family to me. Hey, Hana-chan. Will you be my Nissan? The shock on their faces was priceless, and yet Naruto was being completely honest and waiting for her answer. Hana slightly smiled. Maybe having a 5-year-old on the team wouldn't be so bad as long as he pulled his own weight. Sure. The blonde nodded and continued to his favorite ramen shop. Hey, what about me? Am I too good to be your big brother? Ichiru shouted, annoyed yet again, and Hana smiled before playfully punching his arm. Oh, get over it. You're just jealous because he likes me better. Genma-san. Is it Genma-san? It is Genma-san. Hi Genma-san. Naruto shouted as soon as Genma walked into the academy room. So this is Team 9. I'm not impressed. And that's Genma-sensei to you from now on. He smirked through his senbon as the boy's face twisted into a grimace. Alright, come on. We're going to go take a test. Another test? Ichiru asked with very little excitement. Yes, all down and give a test to each team. There is a 66% fail rate. He loved freaking out newbies, and so what you have to do is get past me and steal the key to my apartment. There are only 2 though, and the one that fails to get a key will be sent back to the academy. Except Naruto. You'll go back to train with Kakashi a bit more. They all wore identical looks of shock on their faces, yet strangely enough Naruto had a contemplative look on his face. But we're a team. They all turned to look at him. And that math doesn't make sense. I'm not too good at bookwork, but I do know that if only one person a team failed, then it would be the other way around in the percentages. And Kakushin is always saying that we have to put ourselves above the team. He was getting nervous now from all their stares, and that Chunin said that the team would become family. I'm getting it all wrong, right? Well, I waited for 2 years to become a genin. I can wait another so you don't have to fail them. He had shut his eyes tight and awaited the judgment of his Jounin sensei when Hana's arms wrapped around him. If he fails then I fail. That's what big sisters do. Naruto looked up at her with a new expression on his face. She was willing to fail with him. He heard Ichiru suck his teeth. Damn, and I thought the team dynamics were so great. Look buddy, you're not going to get a better team. I'm with them. Genma found himself smiling through his senbon. That was the easiest test ever administered. Congratulations, you are now all officially genin of Konoha. Be ready early tomorrow morning for our first mission. And then he was gone. Naruto clung to Hanani and looked around to his teammates. What just happened? Naruto decided he hated D-rank missions. They were chores, really. And at least he got paid to do it. But he found that it was very annoying. He'd asked once if his clones could help and Genma-sensei said no. That these missions were to build character and teamwork. He'd show them character. Not really, he was just getting really sick of it. That was why he sent a clone to study Fuinjutsu and Fuutenjutsu while he had his missions. Genma-sensei had them doing D ranks from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. And then they'd run around Konoha for 2 more hours with periodic breaks consisting of push-ups, sit-ups, and kata exercises. Yes, it was beneficial, but Naruto was beyond tired by the time the week was up and Genma-sensei said it was time to learn clan jutsu or whatever it is that they wanted to learn. Naruto found out that Ichiru liked Kinjutsu, which sounded, at least to Naruto, suspiciously like Kinjutsu and Jinjutsu. Hanani wanted to be a medic, but mostly a vet for her nin dogs, and so had run off to do that. But what really shocked Naruto was that when he proclaimed he wanted to learn Fuutenjutsu and Fuinjutsu, Genma-sensei smiled and had given him a book on even more advanced seals than he'd been studying. Hey, why is this so advanced? I think you'll be able to handle it. He said it with a smile so he knew, did he? Well, Naruto would just have to work harder on his stealth. It was just another typical day of D ranks, but this one was taking ridiculously long. They were looking for that cat again, and apparently they were the best at finding her, never mind the fact that Hana had 3 dogs that were very good at scaring the cat away. No, they had the best success rate for this mission, and so were perfect for the job. What a bunch of morons. Hey. Get back here you devil's spawn. Come here so I can skin you and make you into a coat that I can give my sister for her next birthday. Ichiru shouted in the midst of the chase. You know, I don't think the cat wants to be skinned, Naruto began in an offhand manner. Ugh. Let's just get this mission over with. It's not like we have all day. Why do we even have to do these stupid chores so much? Naruto sighed, alright, how about we do that third formation that Genma-sensei talked about? The other 2 nodded and they set about laying the trap for the kitten with very little enthusiasm. Once this mission was done they'd probably go weed a garden. Kuritsuchi was tired of all the politics her grandfather had to organize. Why couldn't they just kill off all the offending nations? It didn't make sense. When there's a tree in the road, you don't ask it to kindly move, you chop it up and roll it away. So why was her grandfather playing diplomat and why was her father so readily agreeing to it? She had just become a genin the day before at the tender age of 8 and now she was heading to her grandfather's office, so she was pretty sure it was important. Ah, Kuritsuchi. Just who we wanted to see. She looked around to find the Reikage, Tsuchikage, and her father in the office. What? She asked, slightly intimidated but not willing to show it. She crossed her arms across her chest. You and your team are going to go to the Chunin exams in Sunagakure. Kuretsuchi grinned widely at that. After the third stage of the exams we will be invading Suna and hopefully destroy any allies Konoha may have. Then we will take Konoha and make them pay for what the Kuroi Senku, Yellow Flash, did to our village. It's revenge. Kuretsuchi smiled, so we're going to make them pay for killing mom? They all smiled. She was definitely for this. Is Tadaranai going to be there with us? Absolutely, she smiled and bowed. Your team will take a C rank next week. That will get you the experience you need for the mission. You're dismissed. She couldn't get out fast enough to go tell Tadaranai. Harabi, Killer B, was waiting in the inn where the group of Kumonin were spending the night and could not help but worry for his brother. He knew that A was a great shinobi on his own, he was Reikage, but Karabi didn't want to lose his brother. He sighed. Why more war? He knew that it was to make Kumo stronger, but he still felt bad for the poor Konohinin. They wouldn't know what was coming to them, and now that they didn't have the Kairoi Senko, they'd have no chance at winning any war anytime soon. He sighed and lay back in the bed. How was Yujito handling it back home? She was probably training some more, that Hellcat. Sometimes he hated being a Jinchuriki, but when he thought of his cousin and the Hachibi itself, he couldn't fault them. He faulted those around him that thought what they thought. They were the ones in the wrong, not him. And besides, A was important to him, just as he was to A, even if he had to stay in the village most of the time. Naruto grumbled as he carried the cat to the Hokage tower. Making the cat face its worst nightmare always brought a smile to his face, as did all the faces of the villagers every time they saw him nowadays. He really had to thank Kakashi Nai for getting him the outfit. Thankfully Genma-sen had had enough of the D ranks on coffee and decided to have them all train with a few of his friends. Alright Team 9, meet Raito and Hate. Hello Raito-san, Hate-san. Alright. Raito will be working with Hana, Hate will be teaching her no Kenjutsu, and I will be working on Naruto's Fuinjutsu. Thus began the long tiring days of yet more training of which Naruto and his team were tired. Boy, Genma-sensei, can we stop with all these boring missions? They're really getting on my nerves. His teammates froze. They agreed with the kid but weren't exactly keen on upsetting their sensei. Ichiru, you agree with me, right? Naruto turned to the red-headed Haruno that sighed in annoyance. Yeah, they're annoying. Genma-sensei raised his eyebrow and looked expectantly at Hana. She shuffled her feet a bit but finally caved. Oh, please, the D ranks are a joke, and you know that too, sensei. Genma-sensei sighed and turned around. Come on. Let's see what C ranks are available today. Okay, what do we have? There's a caravan needing basic protection from bandits, let's start you off with that. A real mission. We'll actually get out of the village for once. This is going to be so epic. I gotta get those scrolls Kakashi Nai gave me. Hold on. You need to meet the client first. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Okay, but then can I go see Kakashi Nai and get all those storage scrolls? The old man sighed but nodded and Genma sighed too, this was going to be a long mission. The night was black, there was no moon, and the Uchiha district seemed deserted. The streets of the district were so empty that when a little 5-year-old ran through it seemed to almost have the same effect as a mouse trying to run for cover from the broom that was after its head. Little Sasuke was scared. He'd never been so before, but for some strange reason the compound seemed scary for once. He knew where they all were, they were in one of the clan meetings, and as soon as they were done Sasuke's Nai-sen was going to teach Sasuke how to throw kunai. He loved his brother, the newly promoted Chunin, and couldn't wait for his brother to come and help him learn how to use the kunai. He entered his house through the sliding paper door and dropped his bag at his bedside table. Every day he came home and waited for his brother. He really hoped his brother wouldn't poke his forehead again and tell him next time. It was always next time. Either Itachi Nai-san was too busy with his shinobi duties or he had to train with Shisui-san. And so Sasuke waited. He'd be waiting the whole night. The Uchiha had spent the entire night arguing in that dimly lit room under the family shrine. As things stood, it would take a war to bring the Uchiha back into favor and a war to unite the clan. The elderly didn't want to plan a coup d'etat, but the younger ones were sick and tired of their treatment at the hands of the rest of the village. It wasn't until Uchiha Mikoto stood up that the arguing stopped. Let's all just calm down. It is the Kyuubi's fault that we have this treatment. Why not let the Jinchuriki raise our own status? She paused, she had all their attention. On the night of the Kumo incident the Hyuga stood behind him and they were not ridiculed. The salvation of our clan may very well lie with the boy that proclaims from the Hokage mountain that he will be Hokage. He's currently a genin. Please, put off the coup until the boy is completely accepted because he seems to be headed that way. We are not the only ones suffering. Silence reigned in the chamber for 5 minutes straight, but her clansmen nodded and silently left, only her son Itachi remained. Have you met him? Itachi asked his mother with a curious look in his face. I saw him from afar while at the park. He acts so much like his mother. Should he prove to have the talent of his parents, he may very well be the next Hokage. And I did once say that I hoped he and Sasuke would be good friends. The two remained silent for a moment before Itachi spoke up. I know one of his teammates in passing, her name is Inyazuka Hana. Her brother and Sasuke are the same age. Should her team happen to meet up with Sasuke and me, I am sure the three would get along nicely. Mikoto smiled at her eldest son. It seemed he too did not want war. That would be nice, hypothetically. Itachi smirked and then bowed before heading back to their home to find his younger brother asleep on his bed and daylight coming over the horizon. Naruto smiled as he followed Genma-sensei out of the village. His first C rank, he was so excited, and Ichiru and Hana seemed to be feeling the same way. "Boy, Nissan. Wait up." A voice called out and Hana paused and turned back. She smiled and Naruto decided he liked her smile and that whoever made her smile like that had to be worthy of being his friend. "Hiba-kun, I have to go." She ruffled his hair like Kakashi Nai did to Naruto so many times. He buried his face in his big sister's shirt and said something that only came out as a mumble. "Oh, and what's that supposed to mean?" she asked teasingly, and Kiba lifted his head and pet the small pups that Hana had at her side, the three Himera brothers. "You be careful," he muttered. "I will, it's only a C rank." He nodded and ran off waving goodbye. "Hey, Ichiru, why didn't your sister come to see us off?" Naruto asked, completely serious. Ichiru scoffed. "I left them a note saying I was going off on a C rank. My parents are pretty laid back, they get it and won't really care all that much of a measly C rank." "Well, it's your first C rank. That's pretty special. You should have told them." "Yeah, well, you haven't met my mother. She'd fuss all over me if I let her." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I haven't met mine either, but I'm sure I'd like the fussing." The trek toward the village where the caravan would stop and trade was awkward silent from that moment on. "Hey, Fatso, hurry up." Kuretsuchi was not having a good day. Her team that consisted of Deidara Nai and Akatsuchi had been deployed on that C rank, and Akatsuchi and Deidara Nai were being as annoying as always. They had been traveling for 2 days toward Fire Country and no matter what she tried, she just couldn't make the time pass faster. And Akatsuchi's slow going wasn't helping any. "No need to be so mean." Akatsuchi grumbled as he continued, "Watch, one day I'll be fast despite my weight and then you'll have to watch out." Deidara smirked, "I bet you can't do it by the Chunin exams in Suna." And Akatsuchi growled, "Watch, I'll be a great shinobi and an important part of the invasion. We'll see." Kuretsuchi drawled. And they continued along with a grumpy Kuretsuchi, an insulted Akatsuchi, and a smirking Deidara. Chapter 3. Hinata pulled at the weeds, adding a bit more pressure to get it out completely before she looked up to her mother for approval. Her mother's approval was more important to her at times than her father's. "Hinata-chan, why aren't you out with Naruto at the park?" Hinata looked down. "And Naruto-kun went on a C rank today, he won't be back for a week." Her mother's face softened. "Well then, let's make something for him." Hinata looked up again. "Like what?" "And how about we make him a card? Or get him that ink that you saw him ogling. It can be for his birthday." Hinata smiled and nodded shyly. She hoped Naruto-kun liked it. He always got this really strange look in his eye whenever she gave him some of her mother's cookies. Would he hug her this time too? She liked hugs. She reached up to finger her now shoulder-length hair. Naruto-kun liked her mother's long hair and she'd heard that his mother also had long hair. How much longer would her hair get by the time Naruto-kun came back? The sun was very hot on the walk with the caravan to the village and the awkward silence wasn't helping in the cooling department. Ichiru was being much too stubborn for his own good and Naruto just wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone for once. He had realized the one big difference between himself and his teammates. They had a family and he didn't, at least not a real one. He kicked the dirt and continued down the road. They could already see the city where the mission would end. Now it wouldn't take too long to get back home. Good. He missed Hinata-chan. Rock Lee was tired but very grateful that he was getting this chance. This jounin was amazing. Lee got up from the dewy grass and stretched before he jumped up and shook his entire body out. "Lee, I will have you ready to graduate in 1 year, so I will beat Kakashi, who was able to get his apprentice to graduate in 2 years. If I do not, I will do 5,000 push-ups. I will not let you down, Guy-sensei." He couldn't not after all that Guy-sensei had done for him. "Come on, Lee. Let us spread our youth to the village. 1,000 push-ups. Yes, Guy-sensei." Hinata held tightly to her mother's hand as they entered the shinobi store. "Okay, Hinata, why don't you go look at some stuff while I talk to the cashier?" Hinata nodded slowly before releasing her death grip and wandering around the store. She turned a corner and looked at the shelves. There wasn't much to interest her. Her mother's voice drifted over the shelves and Hinata turned to go through another hall, but when she did she stopped dead and stared at the tall dark-haired guy with a scar across his nose in front of her. He looked down before she could get away. "Hello. Who are you?" "No, I am Hyuga Hinata, and you?" He smiled comfortingly and crouched down to her level. "I am Yumi no Iruka." "Iruka? D. Dolphin." He chucked before he nodded. I am a new instructor at the academy. I just started a few weeks ago. How old are you? 15. Her eyes were wide. You're 10 years older than me. Then that means that you'll be entering the academy next year. She nodded again. Are you ready for it? This time her face became animated. Hi. Naruto-kun did it so quickly I want to make him proud of me. He never gives up on me. He says one day I'll be an amazing kunoichi. That's why Akasan and I are here today. We're getting Naruto-kun a present in celebration of his first C-rank mission. His face showed his surprise at the change in her demeanor. Oh? Naruto-kun is it? He's a genin. Must be pretty good. How old is he? Naruto-kun is my age. He's an amazing ninja, he says he's going to be Hokage. Her head lowered a bit. I hope I can make him proud. Iruka smiled at the girl and then frowned. He'd been at the graduation last month and knew for a fact that the only one to graduate that was her age was the Jinchuriki. It had caused a lot of talk among the shinobi. He also knew that if the girl was here with a parent, then that meant that the parent knew about a relationship with the boy. This girl was a Hyuga and by the looks of it a main house member. What were they playing at? What had happened? Well, you be careful not to push yourself too hard. You won't make anyone proud if you can't move because you tried too hard. I have to go, but I hope I become your teacher at the academy. He left and Hinata felt that she had missed something extremely important. The Hokage pulled the next stack of paperwork towards him and smiled at his clone beside him. When Naruto had learned Kage Bunshin he'd asked the Hokage why he didn't use Kage Bunshin to do all that paperwork. Since then the Hokage's office had seen a burst of efficiency and he'd had more time to spend with his 1-year-old grandson. However, today was not one of the days in which he could just go home. Iwa was getting more confident and Kumo seemed to have good relations with them. Everyday war seemed more likely, at least to the heads. The Chunin exams in Suna may very well save the world from another war. The problem was Konoha did not have many to send and he'd heard that Suna's only Jinchuriki was not very stable. Of course these were only rumors. Still, if what was said about the Suna Jinchuriki was true then perhaps Naruto could help. Regardless, he needed to get the nominations for the next Chunin exams in a few months. Maybe he'd send Shikaku to work with Suna on the details over there. Yes, that seemed nice. He finished the stack in front of him and stood, slightly startling his clone. Carry on. I'll be back in the morning, dispel when you no longer have the chakra to continue. And then he left to see his grandson and daughter. I just don't understand why we had to go all the way through Fire Country to get to Tea Country. We could have cut through River Country and taken a boat. She jumped off a tree. Kuritsuchi, would you stop complaining? Her legs were cramping. Who asked you to Daranai? Her arms were aching. You're the one that asked a question. She was getting really annoyed now. Ugh, I'm tired. Can we stop for a bit and get something to eat? Akatsuchi was always thinking about food. It was disgusting, but she had to agree. HMPH. Tired already? She wouldn't let it show. We've been running for 4 days straight. She paused. Alright. We'll stop at this village. One night, but then we have to head straight to Tea Country and back with our charge. Their sensei promised and she sighed in relief. A little bit more and she'd be free from these male idiots. The village of Tanzakugai seemed very comforting at that moment. Naruto had never been anywhere but Konoha before. Now, although this is normal for any 5-year-old, looking around this village made Naruto feel really different. There were no glares for once. No one was making him feel that inexplicable urge to make someone accept him. Naruto found that he liked this very much and was determined to make Konoha even better once he became Hokage. He looked around at the tall stucco buildings while his teammates discussed the mission. Something about it being done and leaving tomorrow. Well, he'd ask Hanani-san later. The place looked like it was getting ready for some kind of festival and he had always wondered what festivals were like. He walked up to one stall and looked up at the stall keeper. Why hello, little fellow. Are you playing ninja or something? He shook his head. Can I play? It was a target game. You had to throw the knife and depending on how far away from the bullseye you were you'd get a prize. Very few civilians had managed it. Sure. Now you just have to throw it at that thing right there. He handed the money to the storekeeper and took the knife. Weighing it in his hand told him that it was moderately balanced, not like a brand new kunai though. He flipped it to get a feel for it, caught it, and tossed it with ease. The onlookers were quiet for a full 10 seconds before they grinned. Except for the stall owner. He grumbled. Naruto chose the giant dog plushie that was twice his size and went waddling with it back to his team. He wanted to give it to Hanani. She liked dogs, he knew that for sure. He saw his team not 3 meters away, but paused. There was another group of shinobi just 5 meters away, about 2 from his team. They looked pretty normal, he supposed. Had he not spotted the metal plate of their hit IA, then he very well may have dismissed it. Except for the tall guy with the vest, they were probably all genin. The girl looked kind of intimidating, but not as much as the fat guy or the blonde guy that had a kind of crazy look in his eyes, and it was as he was trying to get a look at their hit I-8 that Hana spotted him. "Naruto. There you are, Genma-sensei, and I have been frantic. You can't wander like that. Hey, what about me?" Ichiru's usual annoyed face had a trace of worry. But that was mostly overshadowed by the annoyance. And Ichiru was annoyed. She waved her hand dismissively and Naruto peeked around her to find that other team staring. He flashed a smile and then froze. Iwa hit I-8. They hated his father and by relation him. Naruto pulled up a stuffed animal to get Hana's attention and it worked. Her eyebrows went up and she knelt down. "This is for you, Databeo," he said cheerfully as he handed it to her, leaned over to her ear, gave her a hug and whispered, "There's an Iwa Genin team behind you." She froze at those words, leaned away and frowned before continuing the facade. "That still doesn't excuse you for wandering off." "I know." He smiled and went back to Genma-sensei's side and tugged at the pants leg. Genma-sensei looked down and nodded. So it hadn't escaped his attention. "Good. Well, I think we'll head home now." "What? What about spending the night?" Ichiru complained, doubly annoyed. "Come on, don't complain. The sooner we get going, the sooner you can sleep." Naruto couldn't help feeling slightly sad. He'd have to go back to the glares sooner than he'd expected. He sighed. At least he'd see Hinata-chan soon. They left the village with the stairs of the Iwa team at their backs and made it out without incident. Naruto let out the breath he didn't know he'd been holding. They were safe. "I really hope the Jounin didn't connect Naruto to Yondaime, but I'm not stupid, he probably did if he's worthy of his rank," was Genma's only thought as he led his team toward the road back home. "Was that Kuritsuchi?" turned to her sensei. "Any Iwanin could have told you that had that little blonde been taller and without the scars on his face, he would have looked like the long-lost brother of the Kairoi Senko. It looked like it could have been him years ago." "The Kairoi Senko is dead, he died 5 years ago with no heir." "That kid looked 5. Akatsuchi whispered. "Damn Konoha. He had a hit I-8 too." Their sensei now had a crazed look on his face and Kurtsuchi knew she was soon going to get a revenge for her mother. Sensei would make sure of it. "Come on. We need to get going. I don't want to stay here any longer. Let's get to Tea Country and back to Iwa. Tsuchikage-sama will want to hear about this." Kuritsuchi looked to her sensei. "But sensei, we're in their territory. Save it for Suna." She sighed but nodded. It would be an international incident where Iwa would not have the upper hand. When the Suna Chunin exams came up, she'd have her chance to vent. "Genma-sensei, why are we going so fast?" Ichiru was beyond annoyed now. They were Iwa. If none of them recognized Naruto, I'll eat my ninja sandal. Genma-sensei seemed way too tense to be good for his blood pressure. Why would they recognize Naruto? And Hanani had Naruto strapped down to her Himeru brothers. He wasn't wandering off anywhere even if she did like the plushie enough to get him to put it into a ceiling scroll before Genma-sensei really picked up the pace. "That's an SS class secret. If you find out we'd better be in the village." And that was the end of the conversation. No one spoke again, but this time the silence wasn't awkward. It was tense. When the Tsuchikage received the Falcon message he frowned. It looked to be a message from his granddaughter's team. What on earth could they have gotten into? He quickly ripped it open to read the message. And then he had to read it again. Konoha had been hiding the son of the Kairoi Senko. Possible. He was a genin at the age of 5. Unlikely. The team had been spotted in the land of fire. Damn. He gripped the scroll until his hands became white. That was it. He was going to smash Suna and then Kumo would help them obliterate Konoha. Secrets in the ninja world get out and this was a valuable piece of information. Time to call the Reikage. He'd like to hear of this. He didn't like the Kairoi Senko either. Team 9 made it back to Konoha at 12 in the morning. No one had said a word since Genma-sensei had mentioned the SS class secret. So that was why they walked to the Hokage Tower so stiffly. They walked in, placed the scroll among the returned missions which included mostly Anbu missions at this time of night and stopped their running. "Meet here tomorrow at 8. The Hokage needs a direct account," and then Genma-sensei was gone. Besides seeing the Iwa team, not much happened. Ichiru casually said to strike up conversation. "Yeah, but what were they doing here anyway?" Naruto's voice was too quiet. They almost didn't realize he had been the one to talk. "Iwa is a good 4 or 5 days away, Databeo." Hana absently pet her Ninken around the ears, they looked like creeps. She cast Naruto a sly glance, especially the blonde. It took him a moment, but he caught the jab and growled. "You know Yondaime was blonde too." Hana's eyebrows shot up. "What's with your obsession with Yondaime? You know everything about him." "Hey, he's my hero. I'm going to surpass him. Look, I have to go now if I want to wake up in time to meet you guys at 8 Databeo, I'm sleepy. Bye." And then Hana was alone with Ichiru and her dogs. Did we miss something? Ichiru's usual annoyance was present as always. "He's hiding something. Well, I'll see you tomorrow, Ichiru. Come on boys, let's get home." I'll give you tons of treats. DCH. Great. I'll have to deal with my parents. He scratched his head but walked away in the direction of his house. She was running. It was red. There was a dark feeling all around her. She felt like an animal trapped between a rock and a hard place. There was no way out. It was coming closer. Threatening to suffocate her. Hinata sat up in her bed. Thank goodness it was just a dream, a nightmare. Nothing more. It couldn't hurt her. She pulled her blankets down and lowered her feet to the cold wooden floor. From there it was just a hop and skip away to the restroom and another hop to her baby sister's room. She opted for the restroom first, but when she was done washing her face, she tiptoed into the dark room with the silk cradle. "Hello, Hanabi-chan." She whispered to the sleeping infant. "Grow up strong. Make the clan proud. But, most of all, make sure you become who you want to be. That's what Naruto-kun is always telling me. And he's right. Sweet dreams, Hanabi-chan." Gaara was not having the best of nights tonight. He never slept, but when he saw his uncle Yashimaru sleep, he felt this inexplicable urge to try it. The one time he had, it hadn't worked. He couldn't bring himself to enter the realm of dreamland. When he'd asked Yashimaru the next day if there was a way he could sleep, Yashimaru slowly took him by the shoulders so as not to cause his sand to react and told him, "There is a jutsu that can force you to sleep, but you can never sleep, Gaara. It's not good for you. But it's good for you," he'd pointed out. He just didn't understand why he couldn't sleep. "You're special, Gaara." And then Uncle Yashimaru patted his head and gave him a glass of water before telling him another story about the mother that he never knew. The night was like any other night except that the villagers had done it again. They'd called him a monster. Those glares, was he the only one that got them? If so, why? Why did they hate him so much? He wished Uncle Yashimaru wasn't asleep so that he could ask him, but he knew the answer, "You're special," would be given, but the way Uncle Yashimaru told Gaara that it made him feel really special and made him get this really warm feeling, as if everything was right. He looked out at the village and slightly glared. What gave them the right to be mad at him? He hadn't done anything as far as he knew. He wished he just had one friend. Just one, maybe then he'd feel special to more people, not only just Uncle Yashimaru. When the Hokage stepped into his office and noticed the scroll for the C rank mission, he assumed the worst. Who reports a C rank in the middle of the night? He didn't have to wait long. At promptly 8 o'clock, Team 9 entered his office with a tense gait. "How was the mission?" he asked cautiously. "Completed without a hitch," Genma replied, looking straight ahead. The Hokage raised an eyebrow in inquiry as his genin eyed him. In Tanzakugai there was a team of Iwa genin and their jounin instructor. They got a pretty good look at Naruto. Iwa and Konoha are not on good terms. What were they doing here? I presume a mission. They may have been stopping while en route, which is pretty likely. The genin looked young. The old man sighed and fingered his pipe for a good 5 minutes before he spoke again. "Train them, Genma. Train them for the Chunin exams in Suna coming up in next year. I want them battle ready. Kumo and Iwa are up to something and I don't think it's good. Team 9, you are dismissed, do not speak of this to anyone." They left the office in a single line, Genma-sensei in the back. "Meet me in training ground 9 at noon. Until then," he glanced at Naruto and smirked, "try not to make too much trouble." "I'll try, Sensei Dadabeo." Naruto called as he'd already begun to drag his teammates to the park. "Come on. I bet Hinata-chan's at the park, I haven't seen her in forever, Dadabeo." "What are you talking about? You talked to her before we left." Ichiru's words were cut off as Naruto gave an even more violent tug. "Exactly, Tabeo. Forever." Hinata was beside her mother again, with her sister in the stroller, headed to the park with a nightmare on her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about it. It seemed vaguely familiar. She just couldn't put her finger on what it was. "Hinata, is everything alright? You seem distracted." Hinata smiled. "No, Aka-san. I'm fine. I just wish Naruto-kun was here." No sooner had the words come out of her mouth than said blonde appeared hauling 2 older kids that Hinata had never met before. "Come on, you slowpokes. You've got to meet Hinata-chan, she's amazing, Dadabeo. She'll be a ninja in no time, just you watch." He looked up and saw her. "Hey Hinata-chan. How have you been?" Beep. He was hugging her again. She felt her face burn up as she desperately tried to remain strong and standing. "Hello, Naruto-kun. How was your mission?" "Eh? It was great, Dadabeo. But we ran into some Iwan in." Her alarmed face prompted him to quickly follow up, "But it was fine. Nothing happened." He scratched the back of his head. "Oi, Hinata-chan, want to swing? I can push you, Dadabeo." "Thank you, Naruto-kun." Her smile lit up his day. "I'd like that very much." Genma took one long look at his victims. "Alright, stretch and then give me 10 laps around the training grounds before you get back here for 100 push-ups, sit-ups, and anything else I come up with. Then it's time for sparring." He grinned. "I really need to stop hanging around Anko at the bar and just stick to the guys." Team 9 was very tired by the time it came for the sparring, and they stared at their sensei as if he had gone mad. They were aching everywhere. And it was only 4 o'clock. This is no time for laying around. Get up. Ichiro and Hana to jutsu spar only. And they were at it. Punches were thrown, blocked, and deflected. Kicks flew from every angle, and the two were evenly matched. Hana had better form, but Ichiro had strength on his side. When things came to a bit of a standstill, Genma-sensei called out, "Anything goes, now." And Hana won, strength in numbers and all that. Although, Ichiro did get her in a genjutsu before he was knocked out. "Alright, Hana, rest for 10 minutes and then you and Naruto will battle it out." She rested and then stood up with her dogs at her heels and ready to fight. Naruto quickly dished out 10 clones that quickly charged. He began to get a feel for her fighting technique as she demolished his clones and smirked. "You'll have to do better than that." He smiled. "Okay, Hanani. I'll beat you, Dadabeo." He rushed her and made 5 more clones. She attacked with reckless abandon, and so did he. Remarkably, it ended when he was able to get back up and she wasn't. His legendary stamina prevailed. But Genma-sensei sighed. It wasn't good enough. What if there was an opponent that had greater stamina than he, or he met a fresh opponent while he was still tired? "We'll need to work on stamina for the two of you and more tactics for you, you little shrimp." Naruto pouted but nodded in acknowledgement. "I want Hana to spend a week on clan techniques. But no slacking off." The glare got her to nod quickly. "Ichiro, I have some genjutsu scrolls you can work on, but I want you to focus on kenjutsu with hate for the week. Naruto, you and I are going to study Yondaime." Naruto's face spoke 1,000 words. If there was a topic Naruto loved more than ramen, it was Yondaime, his father, though he'd never tell anyone, he'd promised Hokageji and his mother. "You got it, Dadabeo. We begin tomorrow. Study these tonight." He handed Naruto a scroll that had a blood seal and the word Hurration, which he easily recognized, Hana a medical scroll which she readily opened and began reading, and Ichiro an advanced genjutsu scroll. "Meeting time is 8 as usual. Training will end at 5 so you can cool down before you eat your dinners. The Hokage has lowered our missions to 1 a week." The pure ecstasy on their faces at the thought of only 1D rank a week almost made him feel bad about telling him the next piece of news, which means even more time for endurance training. There went their smiles. He loved being a sensei. Later. He quickly shunshined away, leaving his gloomy team behind. "Hey, we'd better get to sleep if we want to survive, right?" Naruto waved and began to walk away when Ichiro stopped him. "You're going to see Hinata again, aren't you?" The comical reddening of Naruto's face was too much for the redeed, but Naruto quickly regained his normal coloring. "Hinata-chan is awesome. You're just jealous cause I like her more than I like you." He stuck out his tongue at his teammate and continued on his way. "Come on boys, we'll leave the tomato to figure that out." Hana left Ichiro in the training ground mumbling. Annoying. But underneath those mumbles was a smile. This team did feel like a family. That Chunin at the team assignments was right. Naruto was the little brother he never had, and Hana was the little tomboy sister. Yeah, they were family. Now it was time to face his real family. Oh joy. Annoying. Kuritsuchi was beyond annoyed by the time they made it to tea country, and their client wasn't making things any easier. He just went on and on about how his luxury foods were so scarce on the road and how they really should take his personal cook. Really? He's very well behaved, he won't cause any trouble at all. Oh, so now he's a pet. She muttered under her breath. "What was that, darling?" He asked in that annoying voice of his, and she cringed. He was getting all over her uniform. "Oh, nothing, nothing. Nothing at all." She glared at his turned back and heard the snickering of her teammates. "Don't." She ground out. "Don't what, Kuritsuchi? We weren't doing anything." Dadara was trying to make her angry. He was imitating that annoying little voice of the client. "I'm not in the mood. I already wasn't allowed to kill that kid playing ninja because it would jeopardize the invasion, however, I'm pretty sure you're not important enough." They both gulped and stepped away. Good choice. She turned back to the client. This was going to be a long week if this guy continued talking. Sasuke looked up at his mom as she prepared dinner and then to his brother. "Nai-san, can we practice more kunai tomorrow?" He readied himself for the poke he knew would come. And it did. He rubbed on the sore spot for a moment and then looked hopefully up at his brother. "Sure, Sasuke. And after that we can go to the park. How does that sound?" Sasuke cocked his head to the side. "But we never go to the park." His Nai-san chuckled. "There are always firsts. Come on, you may make friends and meet some of your future classmates." Now Sasuke was excited. "Just don't stay out too late." Their mother's voice drifted from the kitchen. "We won't, Aka-san. I'll have him back by 7. Itachi called out. "Okay. Come to the table, it's time for dinner. We're having onigiri, so come and eat. Does it have tomatoes?" "Yes, Sasuke, just for you," came the amused voice of their mother. Biba was trailing his sister all night and she seemed to be getting really aggravated. Was it something he did? "Boy, Nissan, are you okay? You seem kind of, I don't know, weird." On his side, we saw a team from Iowa while we were on our mission. His eyes got wide. But you said you'd be careful. I was. She defended, brushing his concern off. Nothing happened. They just something is up with the Hokage, my sensei, and my teammate. Oh, but what about the team from Iowa? That's how I found out that there's something big surrounding my teammate and that my sensei and the Hokage are both in on it. Oh, okay. Nii-san, can you pick me up from the park tomorrow? Aka-san said that I can go, she just doesn't want me to come home on my own. And with good reason, you're way too young. Yeah, I'll pick you up. Now get lost, pup. She gave him a noogie and he scuttled away. Naruto stared at the many different sealing stuff on his Hiraishin scroll. He'd asked Kakashi Nai how it worked and the two had quickly gotten down to dissecting the seal. Kakashi Nai even showed him one of the Hiraishin kunai that Yondaime had given him as a gift for becoming a jounin. He was pretty sure it would take him another week to figure out how it worked and at least 2 more for him to be able to get it down, but he was excited or ecstatic. That was a word that Kakashi Nai had taught him. Kakashi Nai was great, he knew how to put things simply for him, which helped a lot, especially when he was trying to figure out that scroll. Now all he needed was to tell Hinata-chan. He'd see her at the park tomorrow, she always went there before and after training with her father. Yeah, he'd see her after a long day of training. He'd smell disgusting. But Hinata wouldn't mind too much, would she? Shikaku groaned as he reread the scroll. He'd have to go to Suna for the Chunin exam preparations in 3 months. Telling his wife would troublesome. Shikaku, what's taking you so long, get over here and eat. He sighed. His wife was much too troublesome sometimes. You're going to take Shikamaru, Ino, and Choji to the park tomorrow, right? Yes, Yoshino. I'm taking them all to the park. No matter how troublesome it is. He added in his mind. They'll be out of your hair so you women can do all that planning you wanted to do. He walked into the kitchen to find his wife with a wooden spoon in her hand and immediately backed off. Good, because we have a lot to do. And you better not be back before 7. I won't. I know you need this. She smiled. Of course I do. And that was the end of the conversation. Sometimes Shikaku found that agreeing with a woman was the easiest way to make things as non-troublesome as possible. Because things would always be troublesome. Ichiro entered his home as silently as possible. This included bumping into the bookcase, knocking down his grandmother's urn, thankfully it didn't break, and stepping on the cat's tail. Needless to say, he wasn't very silent. His sister was the first one down, her pink hair very noticeable to anyone with eyes, and she immediately tackled him with a hug. You were gone before I could wake up. That was mean. She clung to his neck and he had no choice but to pick her up. Hey Sakura-chan. He sighed. She was so annoying. Yeah, sorry. I have to be out early tomorrow too. Her disappointed face almost made him cringe. We never spend time anymore. He rolled his eyes. That's because I have a life. His mother and father were down at this point and hearing her daughter saying how she didn't have time with her brother nowadays, she glared. Just where have you been these past few days? She asked. A C-rank mission. We had to go the village Tanzaku guy. It's in the fire country. I left a note. But you didn't say goodbye. What if you died? Mom, it was a C-rank. She waved her hand, it's the principle of the thing. Oh, I wish you'd never gone into the academy. That's all Sakura ever talks about now. I worry about you. He blinked owlishly. His little sister, his Amato-chan, wanted to become a kunoichi. Maybe she wasn't as annoying as he once thought. She was still annoying, but maybe just a minute bit less. But you're a shinobi too. That's why I worry, sweetie. Anyway, I've been meaning to ask you, could you pick her up from the park tomorrow at 7? There are supposed to be a bunch of kids her age there tomorrow and she needs to get more friends. Yeah, whatever. Thank you, Ichiro. He'd already begun moving to his sister's room to tuck her in. Hirabi was glad to be back from Iowa. It meant that he could avoid all those curious gazes. And Yujito was here. It was fun teasing her. And she didn't look half bad. In fact, she looked great. He just wasn't the sort of guy to settle down and she wouldn't settle down with him anyway. Being a female Jinchuriki was never a walk in the park. He walked into his room and began putting down all his weapons. It wasn't comfortable sitting with all those things standing rigidly on one's back. He finished quickly and lay in bed for a good half hour. Why couldn't he get to sleep? It was just a simple plot to start the next great war. Stupid Konohinin for foiling the plan to get the Byakugan. Stupid A for falling into the political trap he'd set. Stupid Kurabi for falling for the one girl that could never be his. Forget he said anything. He just wanted to sleep. Niji was practicing his Juiken in the courtyard of the Hyuga compound. It slightly irked him that Naruto had become a genin already. Perhaps his exclamations about how he'd become Hokage were not quite so far-fetched. It seemed that fate favored Naruto and he was left in the back row of fate's attention. He sighed, stopped his form, and took a sip of the tea his father had brought him. He was glad his father still gave him all the praise and attention that fate seemed determined to not let him have. He turned back to his kata and began them again. If only there was some way to combat fate. His father had yet to find a way, but he was always talking about how one day he would. Yes, fate would go down. He was sure of it. That was its fate. Shino stared at the bug on his index finger in fascination. "Otu-san, why bugs?" he asked with that adorable innocence only children can have. Why anything else? And that certainly was the question. What was better than bugs to an Aburum? But that still didn't answer his question. But why did our ancestors choose bugs? Shibe sighed, "Shino, some things are lost to history." The boy nodded in consent. "May I go to the park again tomorrow to look at more bugs?" Shibe smiled, a rarity for an Aburum. "Why do you even ask? You don't have to. You've been going there every day since you were 4. It's polite and an Aburum is nothing if not adherent to the rules of etiquette." Shibe sighed again. His son was a strange one, but maybe the kids wouldn't ignore him tomorrow. Maybe he'd finally make friends. He had a weird feeling. Chapter 4. Sakura looked back at her mother as she was left at the park that afternoon. She'd never tell her mother, but whenever she was left here the other kids would tease her about her big forehead. She sighed and hid her face with her hair before resigning herself to another day of teasing. At least Ino-san wouldn't tease her. She had even said she'd come back today. And best of all, her brother was picking her up. He was a ninja, they'd have to leave her alone with him around. Yamanaka Ino smiled as she went to the park, not because of the current company she had, but rather because she was going to the park at all. Her mom had allowed her to go the day before, and late in the day she'd met the girl with the billboard brow and had decided she wanted to see that girl bloom. That was why she had brought the ribbon. When the trio arrived at the park, Ino made herself quickly scarce going in search of Sakura. The park itself was teeming with children from various civilian families and littered with structures conducive to child play. It was near a bench that Ino found Sakura that day and tied the pink-haired girl's hair away from her face. "There. They all tease you because you hide it, but if you show them that you're proud of it and don't care what they think, then they'll leave you alone." Sakura stared in fascination at Ino. The reasoning seemed sound, and Sakura felt slightly more confident with Ino by her side. "What the heck? Thank you, Ino-chan." The young Yamanaka stretched out her hand. "Come on, Sakura. Let's go play." Shino had seen the entire encounter between the two girls from where he was hidden in the bushes looking for new bugs. It figured that he'd be ignored, but he'd seen that girl endure a lot of teasing and he felt happy for her. At least someone was happy. He turned back to the bugs. They never judged a person on how they looked. His sigh went unnoticed by the surrounding civilians. Tiba had gone to the park excited that his sister was going to come and pick him up and he had until then to do whatever he wanted. He wandered around the park and passed a blonde girl that was being trailed by a girl with pink hair. He had to pause and stare at her for a moment. What person in their right mind would have pink hair? And that was one large forehead. He shook his head and continued walking around the park when he heard a rustling bush. Now, he may not be a ninja yet, but he was an Inyazuka, tracking was in his blood. That was not a normal park animal in the bushes. There would have been a smaller sound. And what was that smell? Tiba walked closer to the bush, pushed it away, and startled the boy his age with his voice. "What are you doing?" The black-haired pale boy jumped in shock and stared at him as if he was an alien. "Why are you talking to me?" I asked first. The boy hesitated in speaking, it was as if afraid his answer would scare off the only person that had attempted to speak to him. "I was looking at bugs." He looked away from the strange curious boy with red marks on his cheeks. "Why?" Still shocked that the boy hadn't left, he answered the boy more freely. "I am an Aburum. We specialize in bugs. I was looking at the different species." There was that transformation of facial features for which he was searching. However, the face became something he hadn't expected. "Really? So you're going to be a ninja?" "I'm an Inyazuka, we specialize in dogs. I haven't got my ninkin, but my sister has. She has 3 and she's already a ninja too. I'm going to be a great ninja." Shino nodded and pushed his sunglasses further up his nose as they'd slid down from all the sweat from the conversation. "I am learning clan techniques from my father. But every day I come to the park to look at the bugs." "Really? Wow, I've got to get Ka-san to teach me stuffs." "Well, which bugs were you looking at just now?" Thus began the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Naruto pulled his butt back up from the floor. Genma-sensei wanted tactics. Alright, he'd get tactics. Naruto pulled out a kunai and held it across his face before he made 10 more cage bunshin and had a few of them charge his sensei while he threw kunai to see his sensei's reaction. Seeing an opening, he rushed at his sensei's legs and then at the last minute jumped up and hit his head on the bottom of his sensei's chin, causing Genma-sensei to bite down on the senbon and mouth hard. I think that's enough training for today." He rubbed his jaw. "Go ahead and go to the park, I know you've been trying to get away all day. Besides, it's 5 now." "Yay. See you later, Genma-sensei." I'll study Hiraishin tonight Dadabayo with Kakashi Nai. Yeah, once you have the seal memorized, come to me, we've got work on the actual execution, he called out to the disappearing 5-year-old. Man, that kid has some stamina. Genma shook his head as he continued on to his own apartment for the day. Meanwhile Naruto had rushed up to Ichiru, Hana, and the Himera brothers. Guys. It's time to go to the park. It's 5 already. Hi. We gotta go see Hinata-chan Dadabayo. He looked at them with those absurdly blue eyes of his and Ichiru, and Hana quickly nodded to get away from those piercing eyes of his. Yeah, Aka-san put me in charge of picking Sakura up from the park today, so as annoying as she is, I have to go. I promised Kiba I'd pick him up there too. Great. We can go together. Good job, Sasuke. You're doing great. Keep it up and you may graduate from the academy early. The praise from his Nai-san made his face light up in happiness. His brother had acknowledged his progress. Come on, let's go to the park. There was a small smile on Itachi's lips. Sure Nai-san. Naruto had been going to the park at the same time every day since he was 3, and so when 5 o'clock approached the civilians vacated the park and the Hyuga matron entered it with her 2 daughters. However, on this particular day, the Uchiha brothers, the sons of the clan head, also entered the park. Aburame Shino remained longer than usual because he'd made a friend and had been convinced into waiting to meet the Himera brothers, and Sakura had convinced Ino, and by association Shikaku and his other 2 charges, into staying long enough to meet her elder brother. Therefore, when Team 9 entered the park it was much more populated than usual. The 2 eldest members of the team quickly cupped their hands to their faces and with the help of the Himera brothers in the form of barking, called out to their respective siblings. And their siblings came running up to them with their friends. Who are they? Sakura asked her brother. My team. He cast an annoyed glance to his sister. But he looks to be our age. This time it was Ino. Yeah, wasn't he with you when you went on that C rank? Kiba had now begun speaking and openly staring at his sister's teammate. Can't you tell? They all turned to Shino at his words. He graduated early. He must be a very good shinobi. Naruto scratched the back of his head and sheepishly smiled. Graduated early? A voice came out from behind them and Shino turned to face the owner of the voice. They all saw 2 very similar looking brothers and Naruto cocked his head to the side. Hi. I'm Uzumaki Naruto and I'm going to be Hokage one day. You graduated from the academy already? Yeah, I was kinda thinking that test was a joke, though I guess Kakashi Nai just taught me really great Dadabayo. He's a great teacher. And he makes things make so much sense. Although, when he has me play shogi it's not as fun. Can you do any Kaiten jutsu yet? A Kaiten jutsu? The younger brother looked to his elder to explain what he meant. What Sasuke means to say is, do you know any elemental jutsu? The Uchiha clan is known for its strong general affinity to fire. However, you might not. Naruto had a pensive look, which looked alien, on his face and had begun tapping his chin as if something were on the tip of his tongue. I think Kakashi Nai talked about this once. I think it was Futon Jutsu. Dadabayo. He had me channel chakra into a piece of paper and it split in half. I think he said I had a wind affinity and that was why I had to learn Kage Bunshin Dadabayo. Then you're learning Futon Jutsu. Yeah, but I'm not that great yet. What's your names? The younger puffed up his chest comically. My name is Uchiha Sasuke and this is my brother Itachi. He's already a chunin. Weasel. The small voice came from the little Hyuga girl standing behind the Uchiha. Hey, Hinata-chan. How are you today? I'm fine, thank you Naruto-kun. Boy, Hinata-chan, how's Hanabi? She looks kind of dead Dadabayo. Hinata turned to her mother who smiled and replied, she's fine, she's just sleeping. Naruto smiled and turned back to all those assembled. This is Hinata-chan, she's my best friend. Hinata-chan, this is Sasuke, Sakura, Kiba, and I don't know the rest of your names. When it came time for them all to leave at 7 o'clock, no one was happy, not even Shikamaru or Chaoji, as they were content to just sit around and watch the clouds and eat chips respectively. Naruto and the Uchiha brothers stayed behind, while the rest left though because Sasuke and Naruto were in a deep debate on which was better. The Yondaime and all the Hokage or the Uchiha. Just guess who chose which side. Naruto, having these stories as bedtime stories, had extensive knowledge on all things Hokage, yes, even the paperwork, and Sasuke, being born in a clan that held great pride in their ancestry, had countered with his own arguments. I just don't see why you Uchiha can't be more like Obito Nai. At that Itachi jumped. Obito Nai? Was Sasuke's response and Naruto smirked. Yeah, Obito Nai. He was Kakashi Nai's old teammate that died in the Third War. They were students of Yondaime and he acted a lot like me. Or at least that's what Kakashi Nai says Dadabayo. Sasuke was silent for a while. And he was in Uchiha. This had been added by Itachi and they had both looked up to him in surprise. Well, Sasuke, it's time we head back home. Aka-sen is probably worried about us. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow Naruto. Though they had argued for the better part of 2 hours, Naruto felt he had made a very good friend out of Sasuke. The next day Naruto had gone to Genma-sensei and told him, "I need to learn Futon Jutsu better Dadabayo." "Oh? And why is that?" So he wanted to try this the hard way. Well then, Naruto would have to show him just what he was made of. "I need Futon Jutsu so that I have something to throw at my enemies, Genma-sensei. Something that's not just kunai. And how would you fit that into everything else you have to do?" He had a point there. Naruto spent 5 minutes thinking about it before he gave an answer. "I'll just study Futon with you. I mean, it's not like Kakashi Nai can do any Futon Jutsu and study Hiraishin and Shougi at night. I promise I won't slack off." Genma sighed. He had a dilemma. Let the boy do what he wanted and risk not improving the kid's tactics, or not let him and risk having the kid defenseless except for the Hiraishin. Fine. On one condition. "Anything? Kakashi needs to periodically report to me that you are doing your homework." Naruto groaned but agreed, and Genma led him to the shinobi library where they found 5 scrolls on nature transformation and Futon Jutsu. And of course Naruto, having had Kakashi as a teacher, quickly put his clones to work on the leaf cutting exercise. He'd have it down by the end of the month. Jiraiya had been in a brothel when he heard about it. War was stirring up. "Here, have another drink." He may have acted drunk, but he was very sober, nevertheless the image his large waving motions projected was just what was needed to get their tongues looser. "Yeah, from what I heard it was like Kumo and Iwa were getting more and more of their genin battle ready faster, and they've been way too chummy or something." He took another swig of the sake bottle. "So yeah. And there seems to be something fishy about the Chuninix of the guy passed out." Well, he'd known that Kumo wasn't going to just lay down and take it, but to ally with Iwa. He had to tell the Hokage, Suna and Konoha had to be ready for the worst. Naruto had miscalculated, however if you asked him he'd probably stumble over the word a couple of times, as Kakashi Nai had just introduced it to him the day before. It had been 4 months before he truly understood what Hiraishin did. He'd mastered the leaf cutting in that time, and had cut a waterfall with his chakra, but still didn't understand quite what Kakashi Nai was saying about how Hiraishin worked. It was slowly making sense, but he wasn't quite that good at it yet. He was so frustrated with it that he pulled his hair and groaned. "Kakashi Nai, I still don't get it," said John inside. "Look, this isn't complicated, it takes you somewhere, and then if you don't have the seal out there you're stuck in that place because you don't know where to go. And you need to be keyed into the seal too, so it's not like you can just copy it out." Finally, the concept made sense. It had only taken 4 months, and now he only had 8 months until the Chunin exams, but he finally understood. Oh. The look of enlightenment on his face gave Kakashi pause. He'd understood now. That was better than he'd been hoping. "Alright, Squirt, go ahead, go to the park. I know you want to." And Naruto did. For the past 4 months the group of 9 kids had gone and met at the park, and while Naruto pulled Hinata around showing her all the things he'd learned, Sasuke followed them around and offered his own comments leading to verbal fights between the boys. Ino and Sakura picked flowers and discussed being kunoichi eventually. Shino and Kiba would discuss the superiority of their clan's techniques, and Shikamaru and Choji would watch clouds and eat chips respectively. But they'd all begun to come together as friends. Naruto was deemed troublesome because he'd graduated early, but otherwise he was okay on the rare occasion that he joined Shikamaru and Choji to watch clouds with Hinata and Sasuke. In fact, Naruto and Sasuke were almost as close as Naruto and Hinata. However, Hinata would always be Naruto's best girlfriend. Sasuke was his best guy friend. The two argued like cats and dogs, but they had fun doing it. They frustrated each other to no end and made each other want to show each other up at every opportunity, but it was done with an undertone of comradeship. And the fact that Naruto had already graduated was really getting on Sasuke's nerves. The few dear angst that Naruto had to endure did not dampen his smugness over Sasuke. "Well, I think you're ready for another C rank." The entire team almost fell over themselves in shock. Genma-sensei had nodded, they were definitely ready. Hana's skills in medical jutsu had improved by leaps and bounds in the 6 months she'd been cultivating it, and her clan jutsus were nearly perfect now. Ichiru's genjutsus were quite efficient and Kenjutsu was coming along nicely. And Naruto was Naruto. He'd mastered 3 Futon Jutsu and his Hiraishin was coming along, he'd teleported once. Yes, Genma's team was ready for a measly little C rank. "Boy, Ichiru, do you think we'll run into some trouble?" They had been tasked with escorting some annoying little guy to his parents on the other side of Fire Country, and the mission would take 2 months. 2 months with a brat that wouldn't shut up about how he was so great. He was older than Naruto by 2 years and hadn't stopped griping about how unqualified Naruto was. "Look, I just don't see how a 5-year-old is going to be able to save me from anything." "Neither do I." They all froze. That was not a voice from their party. Turning toward it, their eyes widened, for standing before them was some tall guy in a black cloak with white-rimmed red clouds that had gills, was blue, and had a mummy-looking thing on a stick strapped to his back. Who are you?" "Ashigaki, kiss him." Genma-sensei had said this, he's an S-class nuke of Kurigakur and a former member of the Seven Swordsmen. What do you want? Kids playing ninja, huh? Well, I have to take that brat. Not the 5-year-old, the other one. Although, the 5-year-old does look interesting. What are you crazy? We're not handing him over to you. Our mission is to protect him, you moron. How annoying. Naruto, Genma-sensei placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder and leaned over the blonde's shoulder speaking quietly while Ichiro kept the Nukenin's attention. Get the client out of here as soon as possible. There's a Horatian seal in the Hokage's office. But I don't have it down completely. And I don't want to leave you guys. His voice was trembling. Genma-sensei's face betrayed nothing, it's the only way, get the kid out of here. Naruto paused for a moment before nodding and taking out 2 scrolls from his pouch, wrote a quick message to the Hokage to tell him what was going on in case he fainted and tied it to his belt. He nodded to his sensei before walking to the client and hesitating. He was worried about his teammates. What good do you think that'll do? The fish freak took the stick from his back and brought it forward with a malicious smile, and Ichiro quickly began a genjutsu. Haha, it's not going to work, he immediately began to suck Ichiro's chakra. Ichiro had a substantial amount, about mid-Chunin level, but the chakra drain was too much. He collapsed. Ichiro? Hana growled along with her dogs. Hana, be careful. Genma-sensei again. One of his students had gone down. Chakra-based attacks wouldn't work. He'll suck up chakra, you need to use taijutsu, she nodded, we work together. They both surged forward and Naruto was left in the back with the brat that was now curled up in a ball. The dogs latched onto the man, Genma-sensei shot Senbon from his mouth and Hana grabbed Ichiro's sword before she brought it down on Kisam's. Hana ni, Genma-sensei. They both got pushed back, Hana was unconscious now too, and the blue freak was about to bring the stick down on Genma-sensei's head. No. Naruto rushed forward, completely forgetting his orders, and created a multitude of clones that took the hit and stopped the blade, while some of the cones he had made had gathered his teammates and was shielding them all, even the Himeru brothers. All around him was a cloak of red chakra that seemed to have a mind of its own. And his body was transformed. His whisker birthmarks were more pronounced, his hair stood on end, and his eyes were slit and red instead of their usual blue. You won't touch my friends. The blue freak brought his stick forward and the red chakra began to leave him, but not quickly, and the freak had a crazy look on his face. Naruto was terrified, he grabbed all his teammates with his clones and the shaking client and concentrated really hard. He was gone in an orange flash of light. Kisame had been given a mission to help raise funds for Akatsuki and had thought it would be an easy job because he wasn't going after the bounties for which Kakuzu was a fanatic. He'd expected a regular genin team. He had not expected a Jinchuriki that could teleport across large distances, for the kid had. Kisame could not sense the chakra anywhere nearby. Well, that would be his first failed mission since his genin days. Damn. Naruto's eyes had shut tight when he felt that weird sensation hit him. He'd only felt it once before and he quickly concentrated on that seal to get them to Hokage. When at last he opened his eyes he found many Chunin staring on the Hokage. And the yellow flash, for the red chakra had dissipated, had caused them all to gasp in shock. A mini Yondaime had appeared with his teammates and a trembling client. What the heck was that? The 7-year-old client cried out and Naruto collapsed unconscious just as Genma-sensei sat up too weak to do anything else. Ashigaki Kisame tried to kidnap the client, he breathed out and gasps came out. I told Naruto to get the client out, but he hesitated. All of us were down, and the Kyuubi's chakra leaked out. Naruto saved us all, but Genma clutched his chest. He was much too low on chakra. Samahada had gotten close enough to drain him of a lot of chakra. Naruto used a lot of chakra to get us all back. Hokage-sama. Take them to the hospital. As soon as Naruto wakes up I'll tell him about Kyuubi. It was dark and there was a weird dripping noise. Naruto looked around and stared at the weird cage in front of him. The last thing he remembered was arriving in the Hokage's office. There was a rumbling coming from the cage, he got a little closer. Come closer. He paused. I don't think that's such a good idea. Who are you? What's your name? There was a pause. Not one of his former Jinchuriki had ever asked him his name before. Kurama. What? And why are we here? There was a dark chuckle, so they didn't tell you. Naruto frowned. Who? Tell me what? Why don't you ask that Hokage of yours? The owner of the voice appeared and as soon as Naruto got a good look his eyes widened. Kyuubi, he breathed, but Otu-san and Aka-san killed you. Ha 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 ha. I am very much alive, just sealed away. Naruto's face betrayed his shock. Like Aka-san and Otu-san must have known. They did it, right? Naruto got a fierce look in his eye. They trusted me to keep the village safe. But the Kyuubi had a name. That was something new to him. Did Aka-san know your name? There was a curious look on his face and the Kyuubi once again frowned. No. You are the first to ask my name, although I guess it's because you're such a gaki. I'm not a gaki. I am Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm going to be Hokage one day so that everyone will acknowledge that I'm a person. I've got friends now too. Oh no, Naruto looked down, you look lonely. What do you expect? I went from chains to a cage. Kurama put his head down on his paws and Naruto tilted his head. Oh, I'm sorry. Ano Aka-san put up with you, so I will too. The Kyuubi growled in annoyance, and before Naruto could respond the sword disappeared and he found himself opening his eyes to a white-walled hospital room with a brown-haired nurse at his side, checking his charts. Ugh. His groan caught her attention and she widened her eyes before quickly leaving as he struggled to sit up. What happened? He asked himself as he rubbed his head and then looked down to his stomach and gripped it. Ah, Naruto. He whipped his head back up. Okajaji. Hello, Naruto-kun. Naruto's face split into a smile, but then sunk into a frown. I met Kyuubi, he says his name is Kurama. The old man's eyes widened. I think I understand now. Aka-san and Otu-san didn't really have a choice, did they? I'm like Aka-san now, but also Otu-san. I'm like both of them, right? The Hokage gave him a small smile. Yes, you are. Naruto reached behind his head to give his customary head scratch. Should I tell my teammates? That is your choice, Naruto. I can't make that for you. The older generation has been forbidden from telling the younger, but there are still many that know. I want you to know that many think no less of you, Naruto. The blonde smiled at his surrogate grandfather. I think Kurama is just lonely, Aji-san. Naruto, he is filled with hate. Naruto tilted his head and, after a moment, smiled. Then I'll cure him of his hate. The shock on the Hokage's face was so funny Naruto burst out laughing. Aji-san, I'll do it. I think he kind of likes me already too. The Hokage gave a small smile. Naruto was so much like his predecessors, if not a little more exuberant. Maybe he'd have Naruto meet the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. When Naruto told his teammates about his tenant, he was expecting a lot of things, but he wasn't expecting what they actually did. They had given him a grim smile. Annoying. Anyway, I like pissing off my mom. The awkwardness evaporated with that comment. From then on they trained even harder. They only had 6 months until the Chunin exams and they had been informed by the Hokage that they would be fighting there. After their disastrous encounter with Kisame, Naruto had grabbed a sword and would join Ichiro in his sword fights while sending clones with all the Futon scrolls from the shinobi library and they learned the jutsu simultaneously. He had sparring sessions with Hana and her dogs too and had whole days were devoted to just teleporting across the village with all the various seals that he drew everywhere. The C ranks after that disastrous encounter had also been much easier. They faced bandits and didn't take as many escort missions because, in the words of Ichiro, they were too annoying to deal with. His days with Hinata-chan and Sasuke team, as he'd come to call him, were shortened, but he still made time for an hour with them a day, and on the off day that Hinata had her sister Hanabi with her, they'd all sit around and have a meal with the other kids at that stayed at the park that late while Naruto teased Sasuke and was teased back. So although he did not have a lot of free time, his days were spent filled and he didn't have time to worry about the ignorant villagers. The fact that he had Kyuubi in him made him feel closer to his parents, especially his beautiful mother, and hardened his resolve to become Hokage and cure the Kyuubi of its hate. He briefly wondered if his mother ever had tried to do that as well. The Chunin exams were coming up in a month and the Kazukiage had just received word from Konoha that Iwa and Kuma were up to something and may choose to attack at these exams. It was for that reason that they had to be as prepared as possible. Oh, the paperwork there would be if they were attacked. The Kazuki had shuddered at the thought and turned to his secretary. Get Yashimaru to bring Gaara here, I need to speak to him. Hi, Kazuki-sama. This day was about to get even worse. He had to see the brother-in-law of his that hated him. He sighed as they entered and his youngest son sat in the chair in front of him. He looked as if he'd been crying again. Some weapon he was. Gaara for his part made no reaction to his father's facial expressions, although most of that was because he didn't understand what they meant. He just wanted to get away. The other kids at the park had called him a monster again. I received word from the Hokage that Iwa and Kuma may attack during the Chunin exams. There was an intake of breath from Yashimaru. He received this information from his student spy network which is apparently very extensive. Should an attack occur, I don't want you to completely go over to your ability. You cannot destroy the village. Be very careful, Gaara, is that understood? The little 6-year-old tilted his head to the side. What was he supposed to say to something like that? So he just nodded and jumped off the seat before quietly taking Yashimaru's hand and pulling him out so that they could go to the park. The Kazuki-age sighed once again. War seemed to be looming on the horizon. Maybe this was what Suna needed, a way to prove their necessity to their daimyo. But Tsuchikage had made the last few discussions with the daimyo. Things were set for the invasion. The Earth and Lightning daimyo were on good enough terms and had been able to come to an agreement on everything. Iwa and Kuma were ready. They were each sending 2 teams of shinobi. Kuritsuchi's team and another one of the promising genin teams of Iwa were going. The Raikage's favorite genin team that completely specialized in Kenjutsu was following with a team that focused on ninjutsu as well, and with the 2 Kage there, Suna would be crushed. The Raikage was pretty sure his brother didn't even need to go, although he would go to supervise his apprentices anyway. He'd just have Yujito, the Jinchuriki of the Nibi, to go along as backup. The plan was perfect in every way. Nothing could possibly go wrong. The time for the Chunin nominations had come, and Jounin were packed in the Hokage's office, hoping to send their genin to Suna. Only a few would be allowed to go, but they could all hope. As per tradition, the rookies may choose to nominate their genin. But none stepped forward. Genma did. I, Shiranui Genma, nominate Team 9 consisting of Inyazuka Hana, Haruno Ichiru, and Uzumaki Naruto for the exams. The 5-year-old. Came the voice of a Jounin. He's 6 now. He turned 6 last October. And yes, he is more than capable. The Hokage nodded. Alright, now on with the other nominations. Where is he? Hana asked and was backed up by her dogs. How am I supposed to know? So annoying. I don't know, you spend all that time in your books, you'd think you'd know everything Databeo. Hana chuckled and then scowled. Where have you been, Genma-sensei? Yeah, you were almost as bad as Kakashi Nai Databeo. Do you know how hard it is to do that? Especially when he really tries. Genma simply rolled his eyes. I had to officially nominate you all for the Chunin exams and wait for the other Jounin to nominate their genin before getting the forms for you guys. He took them out and began fanning himself with them, but if you don't want it, then I'm sure an older genin team would love. And they were out of his hands and in Naruto's as he marveled at the thought. We're going to Suna. His face was bright with anticipation. Genma simply rolled his eyes. Yeah, no need to thank me. His legs were stuck as Naruto had wrapped his arms around his sensei's legs and had begun proclaiming how great Genma-sensei was. Thank you so much, Genma-sensei. You're awesome. The best Jounin in the world. You already knew this was coming. This was just a formality. Stop with the theatrics. You are so annoying. Outside the academy was the newest batch of graduates and their parents, and though some were really happy, they were staring at the weird duo. They were wearing green spandex, had huge eyebrows, and had a bowl-shaped haircut. I did it. I passed. That's it, Lee, use the power of youth. I beat Kakashi. You passed in a year, just like I said you would. Let us keep the power of youth. Yes, Guy-sensei, that sounds like a brilliant plan. Let us train until we can no longer stand. Yes, Lee, that's the spirit. Thank you, Guy-sensei. The 2 green beasts of Konoha left the academy and all the mentally scarred new graduates and parents and went to run laps around the village. Hey, Hinata-chan, Sasuke team. I'm going to the Chunin exams Databeo. He had entered the park at a run. Beat that Sasuke team. Chen. I'm an Uchiha, I don't have to. The said Uchiha was having a hard time hiding his annoyance at his blonde friend and Naruto was capitalizing on that. Yeah, well you're also a team. He folded his arms across his chest. Poor Hinata had to try to keep the peace. Congratulations, and Naruto-kun. Oi, Hinata, do you want to go see the exams Databeo if there's a part that you can? Hey, you invite her, but not me. The annoyance on Sasuke's face was shining through. Hey, she's nicer than you team. What did you say? Ayano. Hi. Hinata's efforts were failing. I said she's nicer than you, team. That's why I like her better. Hinata's face became cherry red at that comment, but they were still ignoring her. Then Naruto-kun they both turned to face her. Why don't we all see you fight in the exams? I'll have to ask my parents, but it sounds like a good idea, the Uchiha conceded. Sure, Hinata-chan. When is it? We're leaving tomorrow Databeo. It was almost time to go. Kuritsuchi was ready and was simply waiting for her teammates. It was a 4-day trip to Suna from Iowa. They had to get going. Come on, what's taking you all so long? I have to get my clay for my art done. That's what's taking so long. You don't appreciate it. The food, I have to finish packing it. Well we have to leave now if we want to make it in time, you morons. Yes, she was ready. She wasn't so sure about her teammates. The team from Kumo had been heading to Suna for 3 days already. The trip was very long, but that was expected. Ugh, my back hurts, this is not cool. A blonde 13-year-old girl moaned. Why do you think? You've got that huge chest, Samui. She rolled her eyes at her teammate. He was so not cool. It had been a long 3 days, and they still had 3 more. What had the Raikage been thinking to send them all this way? He'd kept them from the last Chunin exams in Kumo because he had bigger plans for them. Let's just hurry up, Carrie seemed annoyed by Amoy, stop with your antics. Kurabi-sensei, do something about this annoying baka. You would say that wouldn't you, Carrie? After all, you are very flat-chested, right? Ugh. She threw a rock at him as they continued running towards Suna and Kurabi sighed. Why couldn't someone like Yujito be here at the moment? Ara sighed. They were coming now. He'd been told that the Hokage wanted him to meet someone. He just hoped this person didn't run as well. Gaara sighed as he continued to the park again. There he sat in his customary swing and swung with solemn acceptance. He was alone, but at least he knew that his mother had loved him. He wasn't quite sure what love was yet, Uncle Yashimaru had tried explaining it to him, but he wasn't sure he knew exactly what it was yet. He sighed. They were doing it again. They were looking at him with those eyes. "Let's go," Akasan said that he's the monster. "If we don't look at him, maybe he'll disappear." He heard their whispers. They thought he couldn't. They wanted him to disappear. He ground his teeth and felt something in his chest. Was this pain? Was this what Yashimaru was trying to tell him? It was unbearable, just like Uncle Yashimaru had said. He stood. He'd leave them alone for now. If that person the Hokage wanted him to meet also ran, then he'd need to ask Yashimaru. There had to be someone that didn't hate him. There had to be someone that didn't hate him besides his uncle. He crossed his arms. If there was someone that didn't hate him out there, then that had to mean that the rest of the village was wrong. That had to mean he wasn't a monster. Tamari stared at the daimyo's son. He was so annoying. Why did she have to escort him? She wasn't even a shinobi yet. She sighed as he followed her around the Kazukige's mansion. This guy was getting on her last nerve. Why couldn't he just go away? She sighed. Yes, that's where all of us learn to be ninja. Well, that's a waste of money, she growled at his words. My dad is always saying that we need to spend less money on this stuff because it's peacetime. Yeah, well, my dad says that things can change really quickly at any time and it's better to be prepared. The boy shrugged. She was really not happy at all and was more than relieved when Kankuro turned the corner. Oh, thank goodness, he'd come to save her from this moron. Naruto stood at the gate with two other genin teams, none of them their age, and sighed. Hinata-chan, Sasuke team, and all the friends that they'd made at the park were there to see them off. Good luck, and Naruto-kun. Hinata-chan, Sasuke team. You want to know something? I hate you. Then would you come and see me off? Someone had to make sure you didn't act like a moron. Details Databeo. By Hinata-chan. Chapter 5. It was the day before the Chunin exams were scheduled to start, and although Gaara was supposed to be in the Kazukige's office to greet that person that the Hokage wanted him to meet, he was too afraid. He was afraid of being rejected and called a monster again. That was why he was at the park, and no matter what Uncle Yashimaru said, he refused to leave. He didn't want to face possible rejection. So, he stayed on the swing while Yashimaru left to tell the Kazukige. Naruto stared at the village in the middle of a desert. It was beautiful, not as beautiful as Konoha, but beautiful nonetheless. Look, Hanani. It's so big. Yeah, stop being so annoying. Nobody asked you, Ichiru Tabeo. Whatever, there was that perpetual roll of the eyes again, and Naruto growled in annoyance. Everyone seemed to be annoyed under the Hatsune sun. Alright guys, no fighting. But, Genma-sensei, we're just showing how much we love each other, Ichiru said it with a smile, but somehow that made him more scary in Naruto's eyes. Less loving, more walking. Yeah, what he said Databeo. And then Naruto was gone, trying to get away from the psychotically smiling, red-haired demon that was Ichiru. Come on, let's check in and then I have orders to take Naruto to the Kazukige's office. Why? No idea, but orders are orders, shrimp. I'm not a shrimp. Hana laughed and the Himero brothers joined in the laughter. Yes you are. You're 6. That's normal. Yeah, what's not normal and is equally annoying is that he graduated. Stop being so jealous. I'll stop saying he's annoying when he stops acting like a little kid. Newsflash, Ichiru. He is a kid. Hana smacked Ichiru over the head and he covered it to protect his brain cells from further attack. Hana. Come on, we haven't got all day. Is this the one? Naruto quickly decided that he didn't like the Kazukige. It wasn't anything he'd said or done, it was the look in his eyes. It was a look with which Naruto was familiar as he'd seen it on the face of many of the villagers whenever they looked at him. It was a look Naruto hated. Yes, Kazukige-sama, this is Naruto. Genma-sensei was chewing on his senbon again. The Kazukige lazily shifted his eyes over to the boy. He didn't look like much. Why had the Hokage wanted the kid to meet soon as Jinchuriki? Well, Gaara is at the park and doesn't feel inclined to join us. Why don't you head over there? I'll send Yashimaru with you. The Kazukige indicated with his finger for someone to come forward and Naruto immediately warmed up to this guy. His eyes were warm, not cold like the Kazukige's. Hello. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to the park so he can meet Gaara-sama. Who's that? He is the youngest son of the Kazukige and my sister. Oh, so you're his uncle. What's he like? Is he as much of a creep as that Kazukige, cause he looked mean? Yashimaru was shocked for a moment and Genma quickly bopped Naruto on the head. Naruto, you're talking about his brother-in-law and the Kazukige. Oh, no, it's fine. See. He agrees with me Databeo. It's still disrespectful, Naruto. He's the Kazukige. Genma-sensei was still in lecture mode. Great. Naruto grumbled the whole way to the park. Gaara was still sitting on the same swing and the other children were still avoiding him. Would he always be feared? but he wanted to be loved. Yashimaru said his mother loved him and he was pretty sure that Yashimaru loved him. He desperately wanted to stop being alone. He slowly swung his feet back and forth to get a little bit of momentum before looking up to sneak a look at the kids in front of him. And when he looked up he saw Yashimaru with a blonde-haired boy that looked to be a shinobi about his age and a shinobi from the same village as that boy. He tilted his head to the side. Why were they walking with Uncle Yashimaru? When Naruto got into the park his eyes were immediately attracted to all the kids playing and jumping around. So where is this guy? And what's his name again? His name is Gaara and he's on the swing over there. Yashimaru raised his forefinger and pointed to the small boy on the swing. There didn't seem to be anything significantly strange about him besides the fact that he didn't really have eyebrows and had very prominent dark circles under his eyes that made him look as if he deserved months of sleep. But yes, other than that he looked completely normal. He had brick red hair and, although it was not visible from their distance, green eyes. And in his pale arms was a stuffed animal at Tanuki. But one thing stuck out to Naruto as he looked at the boy. All of the other kids looked at the redhead the way the adults of Konoha looked at Naruto. Naruto felt this inexplicable urge to go talk to the boy. He looked like he needed a friend. And so Naruto did what he did best. He was Naruto. He walked right up to the boy before exclaiming, "Hi, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm going to be Hokage one day Dadabeo." Gaara had no idea how to respond to the blonde boy that had approached him and introduced himself. He was still stuck on the fact that someone had actually come up to him rather than the other way around. "This is where you tell me your name." Gaara stared at him for 3 more seconds before replying, "Gaara. Can I sit on the swing?" The blonde asked and then without waiting for a response to his question, sat down on the adjacent swing and began to slowly swing while looking at Gaara. "So, what is your favorite game to play, Gaara?" I don't know any games. They don't let me play." The blonde adopted a contemplative look on his face and then, as if struck by inspiration smiled brightly, "Then I'll teach you a game." Gaara glanced at Yashimaru and saw the smile there. Was this the person that the Hokage wanted him to meet? Why hadn't this boy Naruto run? Wasn't he afraid of the monster? "Hey, why are you hanging out with the monster?" There were those voices again, saying that he was a monster. Gaara flinched. The boy would run away now. He turned away from the boy. He didn't want to see the rejection. When Naruto heard the words of those kids he felt a wave of inexplicable hate. Who did these people think they were? And so his eyes narrowed. "What monster? The only monster I see around is you. I mean, have you looked in the mirror lately? I bet you don't even bathe Dadabeo." And in all honesty, the kid probably didn't. They were in the middle of a desert, water was scarce. But the kid took it as a personal insult. "What did you say? Oh, so you're deaf too?" The kid was about to leap forward but stopped when he felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see Genma-sensei. The look on his face was priceless. Naruto was very proud of himself and his sensei, but mostly himself. "You shouldn't go picking fights. He is a shinobi of Konoha. You should probably go away." The kid began sputtering trying to find an answer before turning back to Naruto and finally realizing the 6-year-old Wara hit I8. "Sorry." He mumbled and turned away. Gaara didn't know what to say. This guy Naruto, Gaara reminded himself had stood up for him. Naruto had said he wasn't a monster. Why? He had to know. Was this just some cruel joke? Naruto turned back to Gaara with a curious look on his face. "Why what? Why don't you think I'm a monster?" Yashimaru came up behind Gaara and slowly placed his hand on Gaara's shoulder. "Gaara has the sand spirit Shukaku sealed in him." Naruto blinked owlishly and there was a long silence before Yashimaru elaborated, "The Ichibi." Now Naruto's face showed recognition and Gaara and Yashimaru feared the worst. So, he would leave now that he knew. Gaara would never trust anyone ever again. But then Naruto did something they didn't expect. He smiled. "Cool. I've got Kyuubi in me. His name is Kurama. My Aka-san had him before me, but she and Otu-san died the night I was born because Kurama got out." Now Gaara was staring at Naruto owlishly. Naruto was like him. Why was he so bouncy then? Why did he want to be Hokage? "If you are like me then why?" Gaara paused trying to find the right words to describe his confusion at this blonde enigma. "Why are you so happy? What makes us different?" Because Gaara desperately wanted to know what made this kid so bright. Naruto radiated a light that Gaara wanted, a light that Gaara needed. And Naruto shrugged. "I don't know. Hokage was always there and I have great friends like Hinata-chan and Kakashi Nai and Hanani and Ichiru and Sasuke team. Although Sasuke is a team and it's fun to annoy him Dadabeo." There was that shrug of shoulders again. Gaara tilted his head and then looked down. "Ano, will you be my friend?" "Sure, come on. I've got to teach you how to play catch. It's so much fun. All you do is catch the ball when I throw it to you." Gaara's face lit up. He wasn't a monster. Or if he was, then Naruto would be a monster with him and Gaara like Naruto, he was fun. And if they were both monsters, then he wouldn't be alone in it. And he was okay with that. Samui groaned. The place was filled with sand and Amoy wouldn't stop poking fun at her chest. She rubbed her shoulder hoping to get the sand off of her sleeve. Stop doing a pervert, Amoy. Kurabi-sensei, why do you have to leave me in charge of this baka? Ah Karui, always the hothead. Yo, I have to speak with the other jounin. But, don't you worry, I'll be back before you know it. We'll gather round Yo and discuss some tactics. He was gone before anything else could be said. Tactics? What tactics? It's just the Chunin exams. Barry wasn't one to agree with Amoy, but he had a point. There was something odd about Kurabi-sensei lately. Kurabi-sensei and the Reikage had been much too secretive lately. What was going on? Guritsuchi was tired after their run from Iwa to Suna, and so as soon as she got into her hotel room, she collapsed on her bed and immediately shut her eyes and tried to get to sleep. Alas, her attempt was foiled. Guritsuchi, get up. We're having a meeting on. Tadaranai kicked her foot as he said that and got a punch to the face courtesy of Kuritsuchi's fist. I want to sleep, she dug her face deeper into the pillow and Akatsuchi came forward to grab her ankles. Come on, Kuritsuchi. The sooner we have the meeting the sooner you can sleep. She groaned but got up, alright, where's the meeting, and the two backed up and shared cautious glances. She looked scary. You sure we can't let her sleep a bit more? She's scary when she's sleepy on. Akatsuchi seemed more than ready to agree. Oh, no, you took me away from my sleep. That means you're stuck with cranky me. They both backed away and then Dodara came forward with a grimace. Fine, just don't touch my art un. It's in a safe place. You mean your kunai pouch? How is that safe? You just don't appreciate my art un. That's not art. Yes, it is un. Art is an explosion. Whatever, Dodara. Let's just get to the meeting, I want to go to sleep. Not until you understand what art is un. Kuritsuchi and Akatsuchi shared a collective sigh. As soon as Kurabi entered the hotel room of the Iwa shinobi he immediately wanted to leave. There were three brats in a corner arguing over nothing in particular. I mean really. Art. If he wanted something like that he'd have stayed with his team. At least he liked them. He didn't know these people. Why should he have to put up with them? He raised an eyebrow but turned to the two jounin from Iwa and the one Kumo jounin that had entered the room with him before lifting an eyebrow. It's alright. They know about the plan. Kurabi nodded and put on a fake smile. Yo, it's alright. I'll be telling my homeboys when I get back to our hotel room. Homeboys? There was an awkward silence before Kurabi responded, team. Okay, well the plan is simple, but should prove effective. We strike it where they are most vulnerable when they least expect it. What your team will have to do is. Naruto sat on the hotel bed and looked around. As soon as they'd found the room that evening Naruto had eyed it critically and decided that if that bed had 1 grain of sand he'd get Gaara. Throughout the course of the afternoon Naruto had found that Gaara had the useful ability of controlling sand when Naruto had tried to cheat and catch by making 10 clones. And once he'd discovered this unique ability, they began to play catch ninjutsu style. How come you aren't a ninja yet? Had been Naruto's question the moment he'd seen the sand catch the 10 balls his clones had thrown. Gaara paused and lowered his head before trying again, I can't really control it. It just happens. Oh. Well then, you should work on it. You'd probably be a great ninja. Kakashi Nai is always saying that if you work at it, you can get it. Gaara had not been expecting that response to his ability, but he guessed it had something to do with the fact that Naruto had his own Biju. Ah no, who is Kakashi Nai? Naruto's eyes widened, he hadn't told Gaara about the awesomeness of Kakashi Nai. Blasphemous. Eh? I haven't told you about Kakashi Nai yet. Gaara shook his head in the negative, you said his name once, but I don't know who he is. And Naruto seemed confused, why would he forget to talk about Kakashi Nai? Kakashi Nai was amazing. And he'd never forgive Naruto for forgetting to talk about him. Naruto looked up to the sky before replying with a smile on his face. Well, Kakashi Nai isn't really my Nai-san, he's the last student of my Otu-san, and he's the one that taught me how to be a ninja. Oh, Gaara seemed to pause as if wondering whether or not he should ask the next question. What's the Kyuubi like? Well, Naruto's face had become strangely pensive, he's filled with hate. The blonde smiled then and glanced at Gaara before brightly proclaiming, I'm going to cure him of a Databeo. Gaara tilted his head to the side. Why do you say Databeo all the time? Naruto froze. He actually did that. I don't know. I just do Databeo. Naruto had started to get slightly flustered, but then they'd gone back to their game of ninjutsu catch, and before long the sun had set and they were forced to say goodbye. Don't die in the exams, was the only thing Gaara had said, but there was an undertone of panic in his voice which Naruto had been able to catch. Me? Saw. I'm awesome, I'm going to be Hokage Databeo. Hokage, Gaara tested the word on his tongue for a bit before nodding and turning to his new friend, yes. You will be Hokage and I will be Kazekage. Gaara smiled, and strangely the smile looked childlike on his face, and not at all strange. So when Naruto had sat on the hotel bed, he knew that his friend, the future Kazekage, could very well effectively rid his bed of sand. He inspected his bed and found a bit. Good. It was another reason to go see Gaara. Genma-sensei, I'm going to go see Gaara, there's sand in my bed and he can get rid of it. He made it halfway to the door when Genma-sensei grabbed the back of his shirt. It's too late to go out, you're in a foreign village. It's not safe, even if this village is full of our allies. But. Annoying, just live with the sand. Naruto stuck out his tongue and rolled his eyes before he went to go sit in a corner. Sometimes it just wasn't fair. He wanted to go see his friends. We should have a plan for these exams, one of the Himeru brothers lifted his head as Hana spoke. Well, we'd better stay close. I don't care what they say about keeping your enemies closer than your friends, it's too annoying to try that level of deception. Naruto perked up. It was a new word. Up to what? Deception. Lying. Oh, thanks Genma-sensei Dadabeo. What about Hana's dogs? There are 3 of them and 3 of us. Hana shook her head, I need my dogs with me to do my clan techniques. How about Naruto's cage bunshin? It's too suspicious. Ichiro dismissed as he turned to look out the window of the room to the village. Not if he transforms with that solid hinge of his. Hana's calculating expression made Naruto get a little worried, can you transform into bugs? Yep. There was the source of his worry. Naruto's face contorted into a grimace, but he nodded, yeah, I can, but they're creepy, even if Shino's not a bad guy. Genma-sensei nodded in approval to his team. Sounds like you have everything under control. Do it before you leave the room tomorrow, but right now you all need to get some rest. You have a big day tomorrow. Underneath Konoha, in the tunnels that housed the organization known as Root, was a particular vaulted room. And in this particular vaulted room was an old man all bandaged up and scowling at the recruits under his command. Things were not going as he planned. Sarutobi was gaining more and more support while he, Shimura Danzo, was once again left in the shadows. He was the one that deserved to be Hokage, not Sarutobi, but again and again he had been overlooked for someone else. It was infuriating. Danzo glanced at his subordinates and then motioned for 2 of his young agents to come forward. One was the age of the Kyuubi brat that he'd been denied. He gave them the order. She was running again. It was red all around, suffocating. Her head hurt, her chest felt tight, and panic ran through her veins. Hinata woke from that strange dream again under the trees in the Hyuga garden. It seemed so real it had almost touched her, that darkness it had almost enveloped her and she had stopped breathing, or at least that's what the little heiress thought as her chest was hurting. Why did she have that dream again? She hadn't thought of it in months. She shook her head as she got up from her bed and slid her door open before silently walking toward the garden where she sat by the tree and fingered her hair that was at that point past her shoulders. She missed Naruto, he'd been gone for 5 days and the exams were supposed to start in a few hours. She sighed and stared at the camellia tree above her. She liked the trees in the park better, but settled for these, she wasn't allowed out of the compound without her mother. She wished that she was strong enough to go to the park on her own and to make Naruto proud, she wished she had as much confidence. All of a sudden she stood and in her eyes, if any had been watching, there could be seen a fire alight. That burned with determination. She began to do her Juken kata. Naruto stared in the mirror and smiled widely. He was once again the spitting image of his father for the most part because although he had his father's coloring, he had his mother's eyes and face shape. He straightened his hit before nodding to himself and gathering all the scrolls he could find, storing them in another, and placing that one in his pocket. Yes, he was ready for the exams. Downstairs, Hana and Ichiro waited with Genma-sensei and the Himeru brothers, with the occasional annoying from Ichiro and constant snorts from the dogs. Okay, let's go. Finally. You're worse than my little sister and Hana put together. Naruto's amusement at his teammates' outburst was displayed in a raspberry and a smile. Come on, we're going to be late, Dadabeo. And whose fault would that be? They were already heading out the door. Aren't you forgetting something? All 6 of them, dogs included, turned to their sensei. They had blank looks on their faces, you discussed this yesterday before you all went to sleep, realization spread across their faces. At least they had the decency to look sheepish. Naruto nodded, right. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. His hands formed the appropriate seal and 20 Kage Bunshin popped into existence and then their hand seal changed. Henge no Jutsu. The expanse of blondes disappeared and all around them was a swarm of flies. And for a good minute the flies just flew around waiting for orders that the others had no idea they were supposed to give. Hide in their clothes or something, Naruto finally said in realization, and they moved. Wow, the word was dragged out, your clones aren't that bright, are they? Naruto shot Ichiro a glare for this comment. They're smarter than yours. Naruto stuck out his tongue and then walked out of the room before Ichiro could catch him in a headlock as Hana sighed. Boys. Her dogs gave a complaining whimper at her complaint. Human boys, she amended, I love you guys, it's just them. Come along, let's go make sure they don't kill each other. It didn't take long for Team 9 to begin their trek through Suna and to the Kazukiage mansion. How do you know where we're going again? I told you already. I met Gaara, his dad's the moron that is the Kazukiage Databayo. Ow. What was that for, Hanani? Naruto rubbed the back of his head where he'd gotten smacked. You don't insult someone's father, especially if said father is a cage. Naruto mumbled under his breath and made a mocking face from behind her back and could see some of the insect clones were twitching with insect laughter. Just because I can't see you doesn't mean that my boys can't. Naruto froze at those words and deflated from his high of mocking. Yes, Hanani. It'll never happen again Databayo. Naruto's reply was slightly nervous. Annoying. The rest of the walk was silent and the Suna villagers were staring at the Konoha Inn. Why did that little blonde look so familiar? That was the question running through the minds of many of the non-Konoha Inn. The thought was at the back of their minds, but it was there all the same. The 6-year-old seemed familiar. Okay, guys. This is where I leave you. Good luck and remember, it's not the end of the world if you don't pass. No, my parents will just tell me to stop being a ninja. Not the end of my ninja career at all. Ichiro rolled his eyes. We won't overdo it. It'd be too annoying. Genma-sensei raised his eyebrows but nodded. You're all still young, don't do anything stupid. Just do your best. They all nodded and proceeded into the examination room. Aki glared at all the genin before him. He'd been told to keep an eye on the 4 teams of Iwa and Kumo, but he'd been hearing rumors among some of the shinobi that the blonde Konoha 6-year-old had made a friend of Gaara. Personally, he had nothing against the Kazukiage's youngest, he was just bothered by the fact that said kid didn't have a lot of control over Shukaku. So he glared at everyone. He didn't want to make it obvious that he was singling some out. And once all of them were settled he gave them one last withering look before looking at the stack of scrolls before him. Alright, when I call your team, come forward to get your scroll. All the details for the first exam will be inside. The chatter ended. Kuretsuchi was bouncing in her seat. She could barely contain her excitement. The war was going to begin soon. She just had to play her part. All around her were genin that she'd soon fight. The war was almost here. Her mother would soon be avenged. From the corner of her eye she saw yellow and froze for a few seconds before slowly turning to face the blonde before her. Yes, this was the boy her team had seen in Tenzakugai. She nudged Akatsuchi and Deidara Nai in the stomach sharply and jutted her chin towards the boy. Akatsuchi's eyes widened after a full minute of staring and Deidara just raised his eyebrows. Who'd send a kid to these exams on? Apparently Konoha does. Kuretsuchi replied before turning back to the examiner as he called her team up. Naruto was nearly bouncing in his seat when all of a sudden he stopped and sunk back clutching one of Hana's dogs. He really needed to ask her what their names were, but that wasn't why he'd suddenly decided to grab a fistful of the Inuzuka dog's hair. It was the girl from that team that had stood just now to get team's scroll. He could see that she was giving him glances, but he knew why. Maybe it wasn't such a great idea to dress up like his father. It certainly didn't help him blend in, that was for sure. Hanani, he whispered, and she looked down and nodded. I know. Don't let it show, Naruto. He lowered his head and nodded, indicating he'd heard her words before sitting up as tall as he could and breathing as normally as he could manage, which was not extremely normal, but he was coping. The Iwa girl sat down and then Naruto's team was called up. Konoha Team 9. Hana stood to get the scroll herself and when she came back waited. We should wait until everyone has theirs, he hasn't told us what to do yet. Naruto grumbled. He wanted to know what was in that scroll. And those staring Iwa Nin weren't helping at all. He was at last able to shrug the stares off when the proctor turned to them all. In those scrolls there are detailed mission parameters. You have to complete the mission at all costs. Your team must be intact for you to advance, but otherwise there are no rules. When your mission is completed you will be told where to go for the next part of the exam. Dismissed until tomorrow morning here. All the teams began leaving and Naruto looked around at his teammates. If we go to a closet where we aren't seen I can just ration us all back to the hotel room. Hana smiled at him but shook her head, don't waste your chakra. We can just walk. We have a whole day. Naruto shrugged but nodded his consent and turned to the scroll in her hand before gazing intently at it. Naruto, send some of your insects to find out what's on the other team's scrolls. It might be good to know. Naruto nodded and then stared at the few insects loitering around until they drifted away towards some other teams and then Team 9 made their way out of the room and around a corner. Alright, I'll open the scroll and we'll hand it around, okay? Yeah, sure. Ichiro was really starting to get on Hana's nerves today, but she sighed and opened the scroll. It said that they needed to find out the password to the next test. Only the Jounin knew what it was and would have it on a strip of paper on their person, as well as discuss it with other Jounin. Their mission was to either get the paper or make one with the word themselves. We have to be careful. Hana told them all once they'd gotten a good look. Why? What if they know that we're around? They could very easily trick us. So? I already have it. Naruto said, and his teammates turned to look at him with shocked faces. How? Ichiru's skepticism was amusing. Ichiru always seemed to have the answer, but he didn't this time. One of my clones decided it would be funny to buzz in that weird Jounin's ear for a while. So he followed that guy around and he heard the guy talking to some other lady and was saying that he'd better get into the mood of saying the password, and so yeah. The clone dispelled when he found out what it was. There was silence. Ichiru got irritated after a minute. Well, what is it? Can't say. Someone spying on us. The other two nodded and they left the hallway to get to their hotel room. Well, I feel slightly useless. Ichiru grumbled but complied with the team. It was sometimes really annoying to have a 6-year-old on your team. Hatsu cursed under her breath as the Konoha team caught onto the fact that she was spying. She was using a puppet. That shouldn't have been possible. She glared at her teammates and was grumbling over the fact that she'd lost the one team that knew what the password was. How did the kid even get it? Shut up, Goru, Shiru. I'd like to see you do better. And yes, her teammates were laughing at her. Laughing. A 6-year-old caught you, Goru managed in between laughs. She rolled her eyes and turned away. We need to find Asuna Shinobi. Maybe if we hide in those tunnels. Goru and Shiru were both shaking their heads. What? She hissed at them. Sensei told us a riddle. We have to catch them off guard or off duty, Goru began. So a pub would be best, we could get them drunk. Shiru ended with a smile as he tilted his head to the side. Hatsu sighed at her teammates, the twin monsters. That's what she called them, and they were rightly named. She would have had a crush on Shiru if he wasn't such a prankster because, although the two were twins, they weren't completely identical, and what made Shiru different from his brother was what made her like him slightly better than his brother. Shiru had a longer face and had a much brighter smile than his brother. That was the one and only difference, and she could only tell because they'd been teammates for 4 years. It was their first Chunin exam, but only because Katsu hadn't thought she was ready. And she had lost a 6-year-old Konohinin. She was seriously beginning to have her doubts about her own abilities, even though she'd refined them for years with her teammates and they hadn't failed one mission, the goal of Suna. Fine. They set off for one of the most frequented bars in the village, with Katsu's confidence falling and falling. What had she done wrong? If she couldn't even figure it out, then she wasn't ready for this at all. Samui sighed as her teammates groaned. With a sensei like Karabi, it was hard to have stealth, and this was a stealth mission. Damn. Why can't I showcase my art on? Because you wouldn't recognize the meaning of stealth if it hit you over the head with a pillowcase of bricks. Kuritsuchi was really not feeling patient at that particular moment, and Deidara and Ai's constant nagging was really starting to grate on her nerves. Kuritsuchi. And there went Akatsuchi. What? She snapped out and turned to face him. I think you meant sack instead of pillowcase because, he trailed off as he got a good look at her face. I'm shutting up now. We're going to the bar. Henge into older people and try to act like adults. She said in the bossiest voice she could manage before turning around and doing just as she'd said. Her teammates quickly followed suit and soon they had disappeared from the testing site. The bar was filled that evening with underage genin, and in an effort to keep up their acts, some of the genin were drinking all the alcohol they were offered. This led to a very drunk Goru and Shiru. Hatsu rubbed her forehead in frustration. What had possessed her teammates to drink 2 bottles of sake each? Did they want alcohol poisoning? If she'd known they were so eager to die of poisoning, she'd be more than happy to accommodate them with a training session with some of her puppets. She sighed as she moved to go to the restroom and check on the camera she'd planted in the air vent. Did it get the password so that she could drag her teammates back to their home? Yes. Good. Kuritsuchi smiled at the jounin in front of her and Deidara grimaced from the corner of the bar. Why did that smile look so convincing? Yes, she had hinged into a busty blonde with expertly applied makeup, but who knew she was such a good actress? He'd never have guessed it himself. He narrowed his eyes as she grabbed the young jounin's hand gently and made subtle movements to follow her out, and Deidara had to wonder to himself. Wasn't she 9 in reality? He shuddered. He was very glad that he wasn't a kunoichi. She was back in a few minutes with a smile and joined them in the corner. Mission accomplished. Let's get out of here. Maybe your chest can convince the jounin to give us the paper. Amoy promptly received a smack to his head from Carrie, and as he rubbed the bump that had begun forming on his head, he mumbled about how she was just jealous, and Carrie just scoffed. Yeah, sure, that'd work, her voice was dripping with sarcasm. Actually, they both turned to Samui, he may be on to something. Carrie growled as Amoy began demanding an apology, not in 1,000 years. As soon as Naruto had dropped his stuff off at the hotel room, he'd hurried back to the Kazekage Tower and burst into Gaara's room. I finished the first exam, Gaara Databeo. Gaara turned to his first friend and smiled. That's great, he said softly. He was beyond happy, his friend had come back. Naruto wasn't just playing with him the day before to do what his Hokage had told him to do. They were real friends and Gaara was happy. Gaara lifted his hand and showed his friend the bingo book he grabbed from his father's desk. Do you want to memorize the faces in her and then draw beards? It seemed like something Naruto would do, and Gaara desperately wanted to be like Naruto liked and with a team that cared about him. And he kept mentioning this Hinata-chan person. He wondered if he'd ever find someone like that. Hinata smiled and finished another round of hand signs before trying the bunshin jutsu that Naruto had told her all about. "Hinata, what are you doing?" She jumped in surprise and turned to face her father, training. "Sorry. I should have seen you coming." Her father nodded but smiled slightly. "Keep up the good work, Hinata. You've already mastered one of the Academy 3. You are well on your way to becoming a shinobi." Hinata smiled wider than before. Her father was proud of her. Otu-san, can you help me learn the other 2 Academy jutsu?" Her father nodded but then paused. There seemed to be another question on the tip of her tongue. "Yes, Hinata." His eldest daughter looked down. No, if there's a part of the Chunin exams that we can see, can we see Naruto?" Her father nodded. It was the least he could do for the blonde. He was after all the one that inspired Hinata to work that much harder. "Come along, Hinata. If you can show you have improved, then you can go see your friend." Neji had been watching as his cousin practiced her kata with her father and frowned. He should be ahead of her. His father was always telling him that he had the best eyes in the clan. He should be superior, and it was only because she had that friend of hers that she even knew what to do. He clenched his fists and turned to go to the academy. He'd master all 3 of the academy jutsu and prove to the clan that this fate that he'd been given didn't matter. He'd become stronger than the main house. He'd be the strongest and break away from his fate, even with the seal on his forehead. He passed a training ground on his way to the academy and saw 2 green things punching a log and doing a series of complex punches and kicks. The boy seemed to be his age. Was that a hit I ate on his waist? Why was everyone so much stronger than him? Why couldn't he make anyone proud? He moved forward and the Jounin paused and turned to look at him. "What's this?" "A rival." The green wonder that was the Jounin had a smile on his face that scared Neji just a bit, but he did not allow himself to show it. He was a Hyuga. Hyuga were not supposed to show their emotions. So he stepped a little closer and shook his head. "No, why was he doing this? Can you teach me to be a shinobi?" He had finally realized he just wanted someone to look at him and not that stupid seal on his forehead that said he was inferior to the main house. He wanted to be seen as himself. The man smiled a creepier smile. Was that even possible? And why did he get the phantom instinct to run away? "Look, Lee. It seems that we have someone else that will help us keep our flames of youth." "Yes, Guy-sensei. Let us celebrate by doing 100 laps around the village." "No, Lee. Let us do 200 laps around the village." Neji stopped and stared at the duo of green horror. It took about 30 seconds for their words to register in his mind. What had he just gotten himself into? Aki smirked at the group of students in front of him. Those Konohinin had seemed not done anything, but he'd heard from some other Jounin in the area that they had. "Alright, 1 team at a time, go to the next room with your answers and get a scroll for the next exam. Be sure to hide your scroll as that knowledge is crucial to the next exam, which will be explained by the next examiner. Team 9, you're first because you completed the exam before anyone else." Naruto grabbed his teammates' hands and rushed out of the room with the Himeru brothers at his heels. "Naruto," Ichiro began with a roll of his eyes, "do you have to be so bouncy all the time? It doesn't matter, come on." Naruto entered the large vaulted room with eagerness in each step. "Hi." He pulled a scrap of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. She glanced at it once before handing him and his teammates a sheet to sign. "What's this?" Naruto asked with innocence in his face. "Insurance release forms." He stared at her for a moment and she sighed before elaborating. "There is a good chance that there will be deaths in the next part of the exam. That means that you need to acknowledge that Suna is not responsible for any injuries or deaths." Naruto stared for a moment before gulping and looking down at his paper for a good long moment. But then he quickly signed it. If Kakashi Nai had been able to do it, then he would too. "DCH, annoying." Ichiro paused for a moment like Naruto had before he sighed and signed. Hana quirked her eyebrow. "Do my dogs have to sign?" The lady raised her eyebrow before she nodded. "Yeah, don't want to have a loophole." They were given a white scroll. The team stayed in their room that night packing anything possible they needed to be ready, and Naruto was sealing practically the whole hotel room in a scroll, along with any water he could find. "Naruto, I don't think you need to pack that much." Naruto turned to Hana, "BBBB, but I might need it." She rolled her eyes. "You don't need the whole world, Naruto. Relax. You'd be amazed at what that can do for you. Get some sleep. I think we might need it tonight." He hesitated, but caved within 30 seconds. He was 6, he was entitled to naps. Gaara stared for a moment at Yashimaru for a moment. "So Naruto won't be back for the next 5 days because of the exams?" "Yes, Gaara, I wanted you to know so that you wouldn't worry when he didn't come back." Yashimaru smiled at him, and Gaara smiled the smile that he'd learned from Naruto. "Thank you, Uncle Yashimaru." He sounded like Naruto too now. "I know Naruto wouldn't do that, he's not like that. He smiled a Gaara smile, and Yashimaru smiled in relief. Gaara was still Gaara, but he'd adopted some of his new friend's more friendly qualities. You should get some rest, Gaara. Gaara paused, Uncle Yashimaru. Yes, Gaara. I'm going to be the Kazekage. Yashimaru's eyes widened. Naruto's going to be Hokage one day, and so if I'm Kazekage that'll mean that we'll have to talk to each other more, and Naruto said that once we're Kage the villages will have to respect us and will even love us. I want them to love me, and so I need to become Kazekage. But, here Gaara blushed slightly, I need help. There was a thick silence in the room, and then Yashimaru came forward and enveloped Gaara into a hug. I'll help you, Gaara. I'll help you become Kazekage. Thank you. Can I see my brother and sister tomorrow? I want to say sorry for all the times they got hurt because of Shukaku, and that I'm trying to make it so that that doesn't happen anymore. Sure, Gaara. Yashimaru pulled back and smiled his sister's smile. Your mother would be so proud of you. Naruto woke up from his nap with a start. One of Hana's dogs had jumped onto him. Get off me, he sat up and looked around. All his stuff was packed, he might as well get ready. Once he'd packed all his scrolls into his pack he headed out of the hotel room. Hana ni, Ichiru-san. What time is it? 8:30. We were about to go up and wake you. Hana shouted back. What? 8:30? We're going to be late. Let's go. And he practically flew out the door. Did he just use Fuitin Jutsu to make himself even faster? I think he did. Annoying. The Himeru brothers each barked their agreement as the rest of Team 9 left following at his heel. What if Naruto Nidaime Water and Earth Affinity? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.